The morning came cold to the Blue Ridge Mountains. Jackson Shepard woke at 500 hours like he had every morning for 43 years. No alarm, no sunlight yet, just the weight of old habits pulling him from sleep like a hand on his shoulder saying it was time to move. He swung his legs off the mattress and sat there in the darkness of his cabin bedroom, letting his body remember it was 62 years old. The left knee complained first. Titanium pins from a helicopter crash in Somalia, 1993. Then the right shoulder, steel plate courtesy of a Taliban rocket in Kandahar, 2006. The body kept score even when the mind tried to forget. 100 push-ups. That was the rule. Had been the rule since Marine Corps boot camp, Paris Island, summer of 1970. Back then he could do them in one set, arms like pistons, drill instructor screaming in his face about how soft he was. Now he did them in sets of 20, resting between, listening to his joints pop and crack like kindling in a fire. At 80 push-ups, his arms started shaking. At 95, he thought about stopping. At 100, he collapsed on the worn wooden floor and lay there breathing hard, staring at the ceiling beams he had installed himself 15 years ago when he retired, when he thought wars were done with him. The coffee was black and bitter, brewed in a percolator older than most active duty SEALs. He drank it standing at the kitchen window, looking out at the valley below where morning mist clung to the trees like smoke. His cabin sat at 2,500 feet, isolated 15 miles from the nearest town. The way he liked it. The way Laura had hated it before the cancer took her in 2015. The wall opposite this kitchen was covered in photographs. A life in frames. Young Marine in dress blues, 1971. Fresh back from Quang Tri province with eyes that had seen too much too soon. SEAL Team 6 photo, 1986. 12 men in tactical gear, half of them dead now. Wedding picture, 1983. Laura in white, him in uniform, both of them believing they had forever. And the most recent addition, just 2 years old. His son Ryan at SEAL graduation, 26 years old, standing at attention with the trident pinned to his chest and that same look Jackson remembered wearing. The look that said, I am ready for whatever comes, not understanding that nothing makes you ready. He was staring at Ryan's photo when the sound of engines cut through the morning quiet. 2 vehicles, coming up the mountain road. Jackson set down his coffee and moved to the closet in his bedroom. The Glock 19 was in a quick access safe, loaded, one in the chamber. Old habits. The kind that keep you alive when retirement is just a word and enemies have long memories. He watched through the window as a black Suburban and a dark sedan navigated the final switchback to his property. Government vehicles, the way they moved, careful but not cautious. Official business. His gut tightened. By the time they parked, Jackson was standing on his porch, Glock tucked into the back of his jeans under an old flannel shirt. The morning air was cold enough to see breath. The car doors opened in sequence and 2 men stepped out. Admiral Carter Hayes he recognized immediately. 68 years old, 3 stars, built like a linebacker gone soft around the middle. They had served together in the Gulf, 1991. Hayes had been a lieutenant commander then, leading boat teams. Now he wore dress blues with enough ribbons to open a hardware store. The second man was younger, maybe 52, expensive suit that said civilian but moved like military. Square jaw, gray at the temples, eyes that never stopped scanning. CIA. Jackson had worked with enough of them to know the type. Hayes climbed the porch steps with the slow determination of a man whose knees had given out somewhere around his 50th birthday. He did not extend his hand. That told Jackson everything before anyone spoke. It is about Ryan, Jackson said. Not a question, a statement. Hayes' face showed nothing, but his eyes confirmed it. Can we come inside? Jackson led them to the kitchen table. Did not offer coffee. They sat in wooden chairs that creaked under their weight. The man in the cuisine placed a slim briefcase on the table but did not open it. His hands were steady, professional. This is Marcus Kellerman, Hayes said, CIA. He has information you need to hear. Jackson looked at Kellerman and saw a predator trying to look like prey. The kind of man who sent others to die while he made PowerPoint presentations in Langley. The kind Jackson had spent 30 years taking orders from and 10 years trying to forget. Mr. Shepard, Kellerman began. Just Jackson. I have been out 15 years, no more mister. Kellerman nodded once. Jackson, 3 months ago your son Ryan was part of a SEAL Team 6 operation in Helmand Province, Afghanistan. The target was a high-value Taliban commander operating near the Pakistan border. The mission parameters were straightforward: insertion by helicopter, direct action raid, extract with the target, or confirmation of kill. "I know what a direct action raid is," Jackson said. His voice was flat. "Get to it." The operation was compromised. Kellerman opened the briefcase and pulled out a folder. Photographs spilled across the table. Satellite imagery, compound layouts, bodies. The Taliban knew we were coming. They were waiting. The team walked into an ambush. Jackson's hands did not shake as he looked through the photos. Years of training kept his face neutral, even as his chest tightened like a fist. 2 KIA, Kellerman continued. 3 WIA extracted under fire. 1 MIA, Ryan, Jackson said quietly. Hayes leaned forward. "For 3 months we have had teams searching. Every intelligence asset, every contact, every signal intercept. Nothing. The official status changed 2 weeks ago from MIA to KIA presumed. The Pentagon was preparing notification to next of kin." "Was," Jackson said, past tense. Kellerman pulled out another photo. This one was different. Grainier, a still frame from a video. It showed a man, thin, bearded, sitting on a concrete floor. The image quality was poor, but the features were recognizable. Jackson felt the floor tilt underneath him. 48 hours ago, this video was uploaded to a secure server we monitor. Dark web, encrypted. The kind of place where hostages get traded or sold or ransomed. Kellerman tapped the photo. NSA ran facial recognition. Voice pattern analysis, biometric markers. 87% probability that this is your son. Alive. "Where?" Jackson said. The word came out like gravel. "Montenegro. Kotor Bay. A compound owned by a man named Viktor Belov, former Spetsnaz Alpha Group. Left Russian military service in 2009 under circumstances that remain classified. Currently operates as an arms dealer and facilitator for various interests in the Balkans and former Soviet states." Jackson knew the name, knew it from somewhere in the fog of 40 years of operations, but could not place it. "What does he want?" Kellerman hesitated. "That is where this gets complicated. Belov made contact through back channels. Encrypted communication. He is willing to release your son in exchange for negotiation, with you, specifically. Why me? We do not know. But he was very clear. Jackson Shepard, retired SEAL Team 6, CIA contractor, until 2009. He will speak to you and only you. If we send a team, he says he will kill Ryan immediately." Jackson stood and walked to the window. The sun was coming up over the mountains now, burning off the mist. Beautiful country. The kind of beauty that felt obscene when your son was being held hostage by a Russian arms dealer halfway around the world. "What is the catch?" Jackson said without turning around. "There is no catch," Hayes said. "We need you to go to Montenegro, meet with Belov, negotiate Ryan's release. We will have assets in place for extraction. You will not be alone." Jackson turned to look at them. 2 men in his kitchen, asking him to walk back into the life he had spent 15 years trying to leave behind. Asking him to trust that this time it would be different. That this time they were telling him the truth. "When do I leave?" Jackson said. "The plane leaves Langley at 1800 hours tonight," Kellerman said. "We have prepared cover documents, equipment, support personnel, everything you need." "I need to make a call first," Jackson said. Hayes stood. "We will wait in the vehicle. You have 30 minutes. They left, and Jackson stood alone in his kitchen with photographs of his son spread across the table. Ryan at 6 years old, missing his front teeth, holding a baseball glove. Ryan at 16, awkward in a tuxedo at his junior prom. Ryan at 24, graduating Bud ES, the hardest military training on earth, becoming the thing his father had been. Jackson picked up his phone and dialed a number he knew by heart. The voice that answered was rough with age but steady as bedrock. "Took you long enough to call." "Dad," Jackson said, "I need you." 2 hours later, Jackson was on Interstate 81 heading south. The truck was a beat-up Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles and a transmission that slipped in third gear. It had belonged to his father for 30 years. Now it carried 2 men south toward whatever came next. Colonel James Shepard sat in the passenger seat, 89 years old, spine straight as a rifle barrel, looking out the window at Virginia rolling past. He wore jeans and a flannel shirt and work boots that had seen better decades. His hands rested on his knees, liver spotted and steady. The hands that had held a sniper rifle in Korea when Jackson was not even born. "Tell me everything," James said. Jackson told him. The ambush in Afghanistan, the video, Viktor Belov, the flight to Montenegro. When he finished, his father was quiet for 5 miles of highway. Belov, James said finally, I know that name. Jackson glanced over. From where? Yugoslavia, 1983. I was doing contract work for the agency, asset extraction in Sarajevo. Cold War was still hot in the Balkans back then. KGB was crawling all over everything. And you ran into Belov. More than ran into. James shifted in his seat, old joints protesting. I had a target in my scope, Russian military attaché. Asset had confirmed he was dirty, running weapons to separatists. I was on a rooftop, maybe 400 meters. Clean shot. Then someone put a gun to the back of my head. Belov, young KGB officer, could not have been more than 22, 23, told me to put down the rifle. I told him to shoot me or let me work. We stared at each other for about 10 seconds. Then he lowered his weapon and walked away. Never said another word. Why did he let you go? James looked at his son. Professional courtesy. He was a soldier. I was a soldier. We both knew the game. Sometimes you kill the enemy. Sometimes you let him walk because you know you will meet again, and maybe next time the roles will be reversed. The highway stretched ahead. Traffic light on a Thursday morning. Jackson drove with both hands on the wheel, processing what his father had told him. So Belov remembers you after 41 years, Jackson said. And now he has Ryan. And he asked for me by name. This is not about ransom. This is personal. Everything is personal when you have been in the game as long as we have, James said. The question is, what does he want? Revenge, justice, closure. Could be anything. Could be he just wants to watch me beg for my son's life. Could be. James looked out the window. Or could be he wants to finish something that started a long time ago. Either way, you are not going alone. Dad, you are 89 years old, and you are 62 with enough metal in your body to set off airport scanners. What is your point? My point is, this is not Korea. It is not even Iraq or Afghanistan. These guys have drones and satellites and technology you cannot imagine. James smiled, slow and cold. Son, I have been killing people since before your mother was born. Technology does not change the fundamentals. Put a bullet in the right place, and they die, the same as they did in 1950. They drove in silence for another hour. The mountains gave way to rolling hills, then to the flat approaches to Washington, D.C. Jackson knew his father was right, knew he needed him, not just for the skills that never fully left, no matter how old you got, but for something deeper. 3 generations of shepherd men had worn the uniform. His grandfather in World War II, his father in Korea, and a dozen classified operations after. Jackson himself from the Gulf War through the War on Terror, and now Ryan, captured in Afghanistan, the latest chapter in a story written in blood across 80 years. They stopped at a truck stop outside Richmond for food. Neither man was hungry, but they ate anyway, the mechanical refueling of bodies that knew how to function on discipline instead of desire. Jackson had a burger that tasted like cardboard. James had coffee and a piece of pie that he picked at with a fork. You remember Laura's funeral? James said suddenly. Jackson looked up. Of course I remember. You gave a speech, talked about regrets, about all the times you were deployed when you should have been home, all the birthdays you missed, all the anniversaries. You said if you could do it over, you would have chosen her more and the job less. I remember what I said, Dad. James set down his fork. That was horseshit, and we both know it. You would have made the same choices because you are a shepherd, and shepherds do the hard thing. We stand between the dark and the light. We miss the birthdays because we are making sure there are birthdays to miss. That is the trade. That is the cost. Jackson felt something tight in his chest. Laura understood. Laura died hating the job, hating that she had to share you with every war on the planet, hating that when you were home, you were 10,000 miles away in your head. She understood the trade, but she never forgave it, and neither have you. What is your point? My point is, Ryan is alive. You have a chance to do for him what you could not do for Laura. Bring him home. Make it mean something. All those years, all those missions, all that blood. Make it add up to something more than regrets in a truck stop at 62 years old. Jackson stared at his father across a table scarred with decades of travelers passing through. James stared back with eyes that were 89 years old but saw everything with perfect clarity. I do not know if I can do this anymore, Jackson said quietly. I am old. I am slow. My body does not work the way it used to. Neither does mine. So we adapt. We use our heads instead of our legs. We take the shot from 800 meters instead of kicking doors. We have done this before, son. We know how to get it done. They finished eating and got back on the highway. The truck rolled south through Virginia, afternoon light. Two old warriors heading toward one more mission, maybe the last one that mattered. Jackson's phone rang as they crossed into North Carolina. Unknown number. He answered on speaker. Shepard, a voice said. Marcus Kellerman. Change of plans. We are moving your departure up. Wheels up at 1400 from Pope Army Airfield. You will link up with two additional operators there. Who? People you know. People you trust. Kellerman paused. We need a team for this, Jackson. You understand that? Belov has 40-plus security personnel at his compound. Even if this goes smoothly, you need backup. I have backup, Jackson said, glancing at his father. Kellerman was quiet for a beat. Your father is 89 years old, and I am 62. You want to pull my social security records and make sure I am fit for duty, or you want to get my son back? Fine. Pope Airfield, 1400. Do not be late. The line went dead. James grunted. Spooks, always trying to control everything. They made Pope with 30 minutes to spare. The airfield was military transport hub. C-17s and C-130s lined up on the tarmac like sleeping birds of prey. Kellerman was waiting at the flight operations building with two other men. Jackson recognized them both immediately. The first was Tommy Chen, 61 years old, 5'8", wiry build that looked like he could still run a marathon. Doc Chen, they had called him in the teams. SEAL medic for 15 years, saved more lives than Jackson could count. He had retired in 2012 and opened a PTSD clinic in San Diego for veterans who could not find their way back. Doc grinned when he saw Jackson. Same easy smile that made wounded men believe they would live. Jax, thought you were dead. Heard wrong, Jackson shook his hand. What are you doing here? Your boy. Doc's smile faded. Kid sat in my clinic 2 years ago. PTSD evaluation before his first deployment. Good kid, solid. He does not deserve whatever is happening to him in Montenegro. The second man was Marcus Williams, 64 years old, 6'4", built like a tank that had been through too many wars. Preacher Williams. Former Delta Force, 26 years of direct action raids from Panama to Iraq. He had retired to West Texas where he ran a ranch for troubled veterans, teaching them to rope cattle and find peace in work that did not involve killing. Preacher did not smile, just nodded once. Jax, been a while. 10 years. How was the ranch? Peaceful. Until Kellerman showed up talking about one more mission. Preacher looked at James. Colonel, still breathing, I see. Still shooting too, James said. You still carrying that Barrett? Preacher patted a hard case on the ground next to him. Some things do not change. Kellerman cleared his throat. Gentlemen, the plane is waiting. We brief en route. They walked across the tarmac to a C-130 Hercules, engines already turning. The loadmaster helped them aboard and secured the cargo. Jackson sat on the red mesh seats that lined the fuselage walls, feeling the familiar vibration of military transport, the sound that had carried him to dozens of wars across 4 decades. As the plane lifted off, banking east toward the Atlantic, Kellerman opened a laptop and pulled up a briefing presentation. The glow from the screen was the only light in the cargo hold. Viktor Belov, Kellerman began, showing a photo of a man in his early 60s, silver hair, hard face, scar running down his left cheek. Former Spetsnaz Alpha Group, served with distinction in Chechnya, Georgia, and multiple classified operations during the Cold War and after. Left Russian service in 2009, officially retired. Unofficially, he became one of the most successful arms dealers in Eastern Europe. What kind of arms? Doc asked. Everything. Small arms to surface to air missiles. He has contacts in every former Soviet state, every military surplus depot, every black market from Vladivostok to Berlin. He moves weapons to whoever pays. Chechen rebels, Serbian nationalists, African warlords. He does not discriminate. And now he has my son, Jackson said. Why? Kellerman clicked to the next slide. This is where it gets interesting. We believe Belov may be holding Ryan as leverage for something bigger. 3 weeks ago, we lost track of 20 kilograms of weapons-grade plutonium from a storage facility in Kazakhstan. That is enough material to build multiple nuclear devices. You think Belov has it, Preacher said. We think he brokered the deal. And we think he is planning to sell it to Chechen separatists who want to make a very loud statement to Moscow. If that plutonium leaves Montenegro, we are looking at a potential nuclear incident that could destabilize the entire region. So this is not about Ryan, Jackson said. His voice was cold. This is about you using my son as bait to get to Belov and his plutonium. Kellerman met his eyes. This is about both. We want Ryan home safe, but we also need to stop that plutonium from reaching buyers. You going to Montenegro serves both purposes. And if I say no, then we send a team, and Belov kills Ryan. Those are the options, Jackson. I did not make them. I am just telling you what they are. Jackson looked at his father. James sat with his eyes closed, arms crossed, looking like he was asleep. But Jackson knew better. His father was processing, calculating, running scenarios the way he had for 70 years of warfare. What is the infiltration plan? James said without opening his eyes. You meet with Belov at his compound. Negotiate face-to-face. We will have Overwatch positioned on the surrounding cliffs. If negotiation fails, we go to assault, extract Ryan by force. Body count will be high, Preacher said. 40 plus security in a fortified position. Even with surprise, we are looking at significant casualties. That is why we negotiate first, Kellerman said. The plane droned on through the night. Jackson closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but his mind would not stop moving. He kept seeing Ryan's face in that video. The beard, the hollow eyes, the way he sat with his shoulders curved inward, like he was trying to make himself smaller. 3 months as a hostage. 3 months of not knowing if rescue was coming. 3 months of whatever Belov had done to him. Jackson's hands clenched into fists. Easy, Doc said quietly from the seat next to him. Save it for Montenegro. I should have been there, Jackson said. When he deployed, I should have been there to watch him leave. You were where you needed to be. Doc's voice was steady. We all make choices, Jax. Ryan made his when he pinned on that trident. He knew the risks, just like you did, just like your old man did. Knowing the risks does not make it easier when the risks become real. No, it does not, but it makes you ready to do what needs to be done when the time comes. The plane touched down at Ramstein Air Base in Germany 8 hours later. They transferred to a civilian charter, a small jet that would take them to Podgorica, Montenegro. Kellerman provided them with passports, cover identities, credit cards. They were business consultants attending a security conference. The weapons and equipment would arrive separately through diplomatic channels. You have 48 hours to make contact with Belov and assess the situation, Kellerman said as they boarded. After that, we go to contingency planning. Understood. Understood, Jackson said. The jet took off into European afternoon, banking south over the Alps toward the Adriatic. Jackson looked out the window at mountains and clouds and thought about all the times he had done this. All the missions, all the wars, all the times he had kissed Laura goodbye and promised he would come back, not knowing if he was lying. She had died in a hospital in Virginia Beach on a Tuesday morning in May. Pancreatic cancer, 6 months from diagnosis to gone. Jackson had been there at the end, holding her hand, watching her fade. Her last words to him had been, "Take care of Ryan." He had said, "I will." Now Ryan was in a compound in Montenegro, and Jackson was 62 years old with a bum knee and a titanium shoulder, flying toward one more mission that might be his last. His father leaned over from across the aisle. You are thinking too much. I am thinking exactly enough. You are thinking about Laura, about all the times you left, about all the times you chose the job over her. Jackson looked at him. Can you read minds now? I can read you. You are my son. James unbuckled and moved to sit next to Jackson. Listen to me. What we do matters. Every mission, every operation, every time we put on the uniform or pick up a weapon, it matters. The cost is high, but the alternative is higher. You know that. Knowing it and feeling it are different things. Then feel it later. Right now, we have a job to do. We get Ryan out. We stop whatever Belov is planning. We do the work. Feelings are for after. The plane descended into Podgorica as the sun was setting over the Adriatic. The airport was small, a single terminal, more tourists than business travelers. They collected their luggage and walked through customs with passports that identified them as security consultants from a firm that existed only on paper. A rental van was waiting. Preacher drove, navigating through evening traffic toward the coast. Montenegro was beautiful in the dying light, mountains rising steep from the sea, old towns clinging to cliff sides, the kind of postcard scenery that made you forget this was a place where empires had collided for centuries. They reached Kotor after dark. The old town was a maze of narrow streets and stone buildings, tourists wandering between restaurants and shops. Their safe house was 3 kilometers outside town, a villa overlooking the bay. 2 stories isolated with clear sight lines to the compound where Viktor Belov held Jackson's son. They unloaded the equipment that had been waiting for them: HK-416 rifles, Glock 19s, body armor, night vision, communications gear, medical supplies, everything they would need if negotiation failed, and this turned into the kind of fight old men should not be in anymore. James set up on the roof with his rifle. The M40 was 60 years old, a Marine Corps sniper rifle from Korea that had been modified and updated but still functioned with the deadly precision of a simpler era. He sighted through the scope toward Belov's compound 2 kilometers away. Even in darkness, he could make out the walls, the guard towers, the patrol patterns. 47 guards visible, James said into the radio. Shift change every 4 hours. They are professional. This will not be easy. It never is, Jackson said. He stood at the window of the villa's second-floor bedroom, looking across the bay toward the compound where his son was being held. Somewhere in that fortress of stone and steel, Ryan was waiting, hoping, maybe praying that someone would come. Jackson picked up his phone and dialed the number Kellerman had provided. The call connected after 3 rings. A voice answered in accented English. "Mr. Shepard, I have been expecting your call." "Belov," Jackson said, "let us talk." "Yes, let us talk. Come to my compound tomorrow at noon. Alone, unarmed. We will discuss terms." "What terms?" "You have my son. I am here. What do you want?" The line was quiet for a long moment. Then Belov spoke, and his voice carried something Jackson had not expected: sadness. "What I want," Viktor Belov said, "is to look you in the eye when I tell you why your son must die. Tomorrow, noon. Do not be late." The call ended. Jackson stood holding the phone, feeling the night close in around him. Behind him, Doc and Preacher were checking weapons. Above him, his father was settling into a sniper's patient watch. And 2 kilometers away, Ryan was waiting in darkness, not knowing that his father had crossed an ocean and 40 years of ghosts to find him. Tomorrow at noon, the reckoning would begin. Tomorrow, Jackson Shepard would walk into the compound of a man he did not remember, but who clearly remembered him. Tomorrow, he would learn why the past never stays buried and why some debts get paid in blood across generations. He set down the phone and picked up the photograph he had carried from Virginia. Ryan at SEAL graduation. Young and strong and certain the way only the young can be certain. The way Jackson had been once, before Grenada and Beirut and Mogadishu and all the other places where certainty went to die. "I am coming," Jackson whispered to the photograph. "I am coming, and I am bringing hell with me." Outside the window, the Adriatic was dark and still. Tomorrow it would run red. Tomorrow old men would remember they had been young warriors once. Tomorrow the Shepard family would pay whatever price necessary to bring their own home. Tomorrow the last mission would begin. The night crawled by with the weight of all the nights before combat that Jackson Shepard had ever known. He sat in a chair by the window watching Belov's compound through borrowed binoculars, counting guards, memorizing patrol patterns, doing the work that kept your mind busy so it could not think about what tomorrow might bring. Doc slept on the couch, snoring softly, the kind of sleep that comes easy to men who have learned to rest when they can, because war does not care if you are tired. Preacher sat at the kitchen table, cleaning his weapons with the methodical patience of a man performing religious ritual. Strip the bolt, wipe the firing pin, check the chamber, oil the action, reassemble. The Barrett M82 lay across the table in pieces, 50 pounds of steel and precision that could put a bullet through an engine block at a mile. On the roof, James Shepard maintained his watch, 89 years old and motionless as a statue, eye to the scope of his M40, breathing slow and steady. Jackson had checked on him at midnight and found his father exactly as he had been at sunset, barely blinking, barely breathing, the way snipers learn to become part of the landscape. "You should sleep," Jackson had said. "I will sleep when I am dead," James replied without moving his eye from the scope. "Right now I am working." At 0300, Jackson gave up pretending he would sleep and made coffee in the villa's small kitchen. The percolator bubbled and hissed, filling the room with the smell that had accompanied every mission, every operation, every moment before violence for 40 years. He poured 3 cups, took one to the roof for his father, left one on the table for Preacher, kept the third for himself. James accepted the coffee with a grunt, still watching the compound. Shift change just happened. New guards look sloppy, smoking, talking, not professionals. The day shift is better. That helps us or hurts us. Depends on timing. James finally pulled his eye from the scope, blinked, rubbed his face with weathered hands. If this goes bad during day shift, we are fighting their best. Night shift gives us an edge. If this goes bad at all, we are outnumbered 10-1, Jackson said. Then we better make sure it does not go bad. James sipped his coffee, grimaced. This tastes like transmission fluid. Tastes like every cup of coffee I have had since Paris Island. They sat in silence, watching the compound as false dawn began to gray the eastern sky. Father and son, separated by 27 years and connected by all the wars in between. Tell me about Ryan, James said, not the SEAL, the boy. I want to know who he was before the uniform. Jackson took a long breath. He was quiet, even as a kid. Laura used to worry he did not have friends, did not play sports, just sat in his room reading or drawing. I told her he was fine, that some boys were just like that. But the truth was, I did not know what he was like because I was never there. You were deployed. I was always deployed. When he was 6, I was in Somalia. When he was 10, I was in Afghanistan. When he was 14, I was in Iraq. By the time I retired, he was 18 and leaving for the Navy. I missed everything that mattered. But he still chose the teams, still followed your path. Jackson nodded slowly. The day he graduated buds, he asked me if I was proud. I said yes. He asked me if it was worth it. All the sacrifice, all the pain, all the things he gave up to make it through. I told him it was always worth it, that serving was the highest calling, that being a SEAL meant something. Did you believe that when you said it? Jackson looked at his father. I do not know anymore. I do not know if anything we did mattered, or if we were just old men sending young men to die for reasons that sounded noble, but were really just about oil and politics and keeping defense contractors rich. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he set down his coffee and turned to face his son directly. I'm going to tell you something I have never told you before. When I was 24 years old in Korea, I killed 37 men. Confirmed kills. Close range. I saw their faces. I watched them die. And for 40 years after I asked myself the same question you are asking now. Did it matter? Was it worth it? Did I make the world better or just add to the body count? What did you decide? That I will never know. None of us will. We do not get to see the alternative timeline where we stayed home. We do not get to know if the men I killed would have killed innocents or become doctors or died of old age in their beds. All I know is that I stood between my country and the enemy. I did what I was asked to do. I lived with honor. And I raised a son who did the same. James put his hand on Jackson's shoulder. Now that son has a son who needs him. That is what matters today. Not Korea, not Vietnam, not Iraq. Today we get Ryan home. Everything else is noise. The sun rose over Montenegro, turning the Adriatic from black to blue to blinding silver. Tourist boats began to move in the bay. The old town of Kotor came alive with the sounds of a place that had survived Romans and Venetians and Ottomans and Nazis, and now served overpriced coffee to Germans and Americans with cameras. At 0900, Kellerman called on the secure satellite phone. Status, he said. We are in position. Meeting is at noon. Jackson paused. I want to know something. Why does Belov want me specifically? What is the connection? Kellerman was quiet for 3 seconds too long. We are still looking into that. You are lying. You know why he wants me, and you are not telling me. Jackson, the priority is getting your son back. The history between you and Belov is secondary. Nothing about this feels secondary. Jackson felt anger rising in his chest, the hot kind that made mistakes. You sent me here blind. If this goes wrong, it is on you. If this goes wrong, you will be too dead to care whose fault it is. Kellerman's voice was cold. Noon, go unarmed like he asked. We will have eyes on you the whole time. If he makes a move, we go loud. And Ryan dies in the crossfire. Maybe. Maybe not. But you do not have better options. The line went dead. Jackson stood holding the phone, wanting to throw it across the room, but knowing that would solve nothing. His father was right. All that mattered was the mission. Get Ryan out. Everything else was noise. At 1100 hours, Jackson showered and dressed. Jeans, flannel shirt, work boots. The clothes of a man who worked with his hands, not a man who had spent 30 years killing for his country. He left his weapons in the villa. left his phone, walked out carrying nothing but the weight of 62 years and whatever courage remained after 4 decades of war. Doc met him at the door. "You do not have to do this alone." "Yes, I do. If I bring backup, he kills Ryan." Those were his terms. Terms can be negotiated, not these. Jackson looked at the 3 men who had come to Montenegro for him, for his son, men who had put their own lives on hold because that was what brothers did. "Thank you for being here, for coming when I called." "We have done this before," Preacher said. "We will do it again. You go talk. We watch your back. If it goes bad, we come in hard." "Try not to let it go bad," Doc said. "I'm getting too old to run." Jackson almost smiled. Then he walked out into Montenegrin morning sun and got into the rental car and drove toward Viktor Belov's compound, wondering if he would ever see any of them again. The compound sat on a cliff overlooking the bay, surrounded by walls that were part medieval fortress and part modern security installation. Cameras on every corner, motion sensors, guards at the gate carrying AK-74s that were clean and well-maintained. These were not weekend warriors playing soldier. These were professionals who knew their business. Jackson stopped at the gate and rolled down his window. A guard approached, young, Slavic features, eyes that never stopped scanning. "Jackson Shepard, I have an appointment." The guard spoke into a radio in rapid Serbian, waited for a response, then nodded and stepped back. The gate opened with a mechanical hum. Jackson drove through, feeling like a cow walking into a slaughterhouse, aware and helpless, and moving forward anyway because there was no other choice. He parked in a courtyard paved with cobblestones that were probably older than America. Guards watched from positions on the walls. He counted 12 visible, knew there were more he could not see. His father had said 47 last night. Jackson believed it. Another guard met him at the car. Older, scarred face, the look of a man who had seen real combat. He patted Jackson down with professional efficiency, checking for weapons, wires, anything that might be a threat. Found nothing because Jackson had brought nothing. "This way," the guard said in accented English. They walked through a garden that was beautiful and manicured and felt wrong in a place designed for violence. Rose bushes, fountains, gravel paths, like someone had tried to make a fortress feel like a home and failed. The main house was 3 stories of stone and timber, old-world architecture with modern windows that probably cost more than Jackson's truck. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of wood smoke and coffee. The guard led him through a hallway lined with art that Jackson did not understand but suspected was expensive. They stopped at a set of double doors made of dark wood carved with patterns that might have been religious or might have been decorative. Jackson could not tell and did not care. The guard opened the doors and stepped aside. Jackson walked into a room that was too large for its purpose. High ceilings, stone walls, a fireplace big enough to roast a pig. Windows overlooking the bay where sailboats moved like white birds across blue water. And standing at those windows, hands behind his back, was a man Jackson Shepard had never consciously seen before, but who had clearly been waiting 62 years for this moment. Viktor Belov turned around. He was 63 years old, Jackson's age plus 1 year, with silver hair cut military short and a face that was all hard angles and old scars. The left cheek bore a mark that might have been from shrapnel or a knife. His eyes were gray and cold and measured Jackson with the kind of assessment that professionals gave each other across a divide that might be bridged or might end in blood. "Jackson Shepard," Belov said. His English was good, accent present but not thick. "You look like your photograph. Older but the same man." "Where is my son?" "Alive. For now." Belov moved away from the window, walked to a sideboard where bottles of liquor stood in neat rows. He poured 2 glasses of something amber, brought one to Jackson. "Drink. We have much to discuss." "I did not come here to drink. I came for Ryan." Belov smiled without warmth. "Yes, you came for your son. Just as I once had a brother who would have come for me, if I had not lost him to men like you." Jackson did not take the offered glass. In his ear, invisible and silent, the communications device Doc had slipped into his jacket pocket before he left transmitted everything to the villa where his father and Preacher and Doc listened. Insurance, in case this went wrong and someone needed to know how. "What happened to your brother?" Jackson asked. Belov set down the glass he had offered, kept his own. "Beirut, 1987. His name was Dmitri. He was 20 years old. KGB sent him as military advisor to Hezbollah. The Americans wanted a hostage extracted. sent a SEAL team. My brother was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Jackson felt something cold beginning in his chest. SEALs do not target civilians. He was armed. He was wearing tactical gear. To your men, he was hostile. Belov drank his liquor in one smooth motion. They killed him. Double tap, center mass, professional execution. He was dead before he hit the ground. I'm sorry about your brother, but that was war. People die in war. Yes, people die. Belov set down his glass with precise control. For 37 years, I did not know who killed him. The mission was classified. The names were redacted. But 6 months ago, I learned the truth. The team leader that night, the man who gave the order to engage. His name was Jackson Shepard. The cold in Jackson's chest spread to his limbs. He did not remember Beirut clearly. There had been too many missions, too many targets, too many rooms cleared and hostiles engaged. Faces blurred together after 40 years. But the details Belov described fit. 1987, hostage extraction, a room, a hostel, a decision made in half a second. I do not remember your brother, Jackson said quietly. If I killed him, I did not know his name, did not know he had family. He was a threat, and I eliminated the threat. That was my job. And now it is my job to make you understand what you took from me. Belov snapped his fingers. Guards opened a side door. They brought Ryan in. Jackson felt the world narrow to a tunnel. His son, 26 years old, thin, bruised, left eye swollen, walking with a limp. 3 months of captivity showing in every line of his body, but alive, alert. SEAL eyes still sharp and tracking threats even as the guards held his arms. Dad, Ryan said. His voice was rough, damaged. You should not be here. It is a trap. I know, Jackson said. He could not look away from his son, could not process anything except the fact that Ryan was alive and hurt and within reach. I am taking you home. No, Belov said. You are not. He pulled a pistol from inside his jacket. Soviet-era Makarov, 9mm, 8 rounds. He handed it to Jackson. 1 bullet. You choose. Choose what? Belov's face was stone. You shoot me, my guards kill you both. You shoot yourself, I let Ryan go. You do nothing, I kill Ryan now and make you watch. You have 60 seconds. The pistol was heavy in Jackson's hand. He looked at the weapon, at Belov, at his son. Ryan stood straight despite the injuries, despite the fear that Jackson could see in his eyes. Dad, do not, Ryan said. I am a SEAL. This is the job. This is what I signed up for. I am not losing you, Jackson said. You already lost Mom. Do not throw your life away for mine. 40 seconds, Belov said. In Jackson's ear, barely audible, his father's voice. I have a shot. Belov's head. Say the word. Jackson spoke aloud, knowing Belov would hear but not caring. Too many guards. They will kill Ryan. 30 seconds. Jackson raised the pistol, not at Belov, not at himself, aimed at the ceiling. His mind was racing through scenarios, calculating odds, looking for the play that got them both out alive. You are very calm for a man choosing death, Belov observed. I have chosen death before. It never takes. Jackson met Belov's eyes directly. Why now? Your brother died 37 years ago. Why wait until now? Belov's expression flickered. Micro-expression, barely visible, but Jackson caught it. Surprise. Confusion. Something that did not fit the script. Because I only learned 6 months ago, Belov said. But his voice had changed, less certain, less angry. Who told you? Jackson asked. Because you and I both know that mission was buried deeper than Kennedy's brain. Soviet military advisor killed by American special operations in Lebanon? That stays classified for 100 years. So who dug it up? Who told you I killed your brother? Who set this up? 20 seconds, Belov said. But he did not sound like a man counting down to execution anymore. He sounded like a man realizing he had been played. It was CIA, Jackson pressed. Someone gave you my name. Someone told you about Beirut. Someone pointed you at me and wound you up like a toy soldier and sent you marching. Who was it, Viktor? Who gave you the intelligence? Belov's hand moved toward a second weapon. Jackson reacted on instinct and 40 years of training. Raised the Makarov, not at Belov, at the light bulb in the chandelier above them. Fired. Glass exploded. The room plunged into darkness. Ryan moved at the same instant. SEAL training overriding injury and exhaustion. dropped his weight, broke the grip of the guards holding him, drove an elbow into the nearest face. Bones cracked. Someone screamed. Jackson was already moving, muscle memory taking over. 3 steps left. Door at 10 o'clock. He grabbed Ryan as he passed. Move. They ran. Behind them, guards were shouting in Serbian, Russian, English. Weapon safeties clicked off with sounds like breaking bones. Automatic fire tore through the darkness, wild, suppressive. The sound of professionals who had lost control of the situation and were trying to regain it through violence. From 2 kilometers away, James Shepard saw the muzzle flashes through his scope, saw the window shatter as guards opened fire, saw 2 figures running across the courtyard. Contact, James said into his radio. Jax is moving with the package. I am engaging. He fired. The M40 was old, but its accuracy was eternal. The first guard dropped with a hole where his forehead used to be. James worked the bolt, ejected the brass, chambered another round. Second guard was turning, bringing his AK to bear on Jackson and Ryan. James put a bullet through his chest. He went down like someone had kicked his legs out from under him. Preacher, you are up, James said calmly. 300 meters from the compound, Preacher Williams rose from concealment with the Barrett M82 against his shoulder. The rifle weighed 30 pounds and fired 50 caliber rounds designed to disable vehicles. Against human targets, it was obscene, but Preacher had not carried it across the Atlantic to be subtle. He fired. The sound was apocalyptic. The round crossed 300 meters in less than a second and hit a guard on the compound wall. The man came apart, not killed, destroyed, erased from existence by physics and engineering. Hammer is in the fight, Preacher said, moving to secondary position. Doc Chen grabbed his medical kit and rifle and ran for the van. He was 61 years old and his knees protested, but he ignored them because brothers were in contact and nothing else mattered. He keyed his radio. Firefly 1, this is Doc. I am coming for extract. Where do you need me? East wall, Jackson's voice came back, strained, breathing hard. Breach point, 2 minutes. Bring everything. Doc threw the van into gear and accelerated down the mountain road toward the compound. Behind him, he could hear the distant crack of his father's rifle, the thunder of Preacher's Barrett, the staccato chatter of automatic weapons, the sound of war, the sound that had followed them all across decades and continents. Inside the compound, Jackson and Ryan were running a fighting retreat. Ryan was limping badly, left leg barely functional, but he kept moving because stopping meant dying. Jackson fired the Makarov blind, not aiming, just making noise to keep the guards cautious. 5 rounds left. 4, 3. They reached the east wall where it met the cliff edge. 30 feet of stone and no way over. Jackson looked left and right, searching for options that did not exist. We are trapped, Ryan said. He was breathing hard, pain twisting his face. No, we are not, Jackson pointed at the cliff edge. We go down. Ryan looked over the edge at 40 feet of vertical rock face dropping to the Adriatic. That is insane. Welcome to the family business. From above them, muzzle flashes lit the compound walls as guards converged on their position. Jackson grabbed Ryan and they went over the edge together, rappelling down rock with no rope, just hands and boots and prayers to gods neither man believed in anymore. They hit the water hard. The Adriatic in December was cold enough to stop your heart. Jackson surfaced gasping, looked around for Ryan, saw him 20 feet away, struggling to stay afloat with an injured leg. Swim, Jackson shouted. North, 200 meters. He grabbed his son and started swimming. One arm pulling Ryan, the other stroking through water that felt like knives. Behind them, the compound wall lit up with muzzle flashes as guards fired down at the water. Rounds zipped past with sounds like angry insects. Some hit the water near them, creating small geysers of spray. James adjusted his scope, calculated for wind and distance, and the movement of targets along the wall. Guards were silhouetted against the sky, perfect targets if you had spent 70 years learning how to make impossible shots. He fired methodically. 1 guard down, work the bolt. 2nd guard down, eject the brass. 3rd guard stumbling back from a round that missed his head by an inch but convinced him being on that wall was a very bad idea. They are in the water, James said, headed north. Doc, what is your position? Approaching from the coast road. I see them. Doc pulled the van to a stop at a small beach 200 meters north of the compound. He jumped out with his rifle and medical kit, scanning the water for Jackson and Ryan. There, 2 figures swimming, one struggling. Doc waded into the water up to his chest. The cold tried to lock his muscles, but he pushed through it because cold was just sensation and could be ignored. He reached Jackson and Ryan as they made shore, grabbed Ryan under the arms, dragged him up onto the beach. Ryan was shaking, hypothermia setting in fast. Doc pulled a thermal blanket from his kit and wrapped him, laid him down, started triage. Shoulder wound, old, infected. Leg injury, ligament damage, ribs broken or bruised, dehydration, malnutrition. He will live, Doc said, but he needs a hospital. Closest hospital is 30 kilometers, Jackson said through chattering teeth. He was watching the compound. Guards were mobilizing, vehicles starting. They have maybe 5 minutes before this beach became a killing ground. Preacher's voice on the radio, I am delaying them. Watch for secondaries. 2 seconds later, an explosion rocked the compound. Black smoke rose from the motor pool where Preacher had put a .50 caliber incendiary round into a fuel truck. Vehicles were burning, guards were running, chaos was a weapon, and Preacher was a master. Get to the van, Doc said. I have Ryan. They carried him between them, Jackson taking his son's weight despite his own exhaustion and hypothermia. They reached the van and loaded Ryan into the back. Doc started an IV, pushed antibiotics, worked with the efficient calm of a man who had kept Marines alive in Fallujah and knew that panic killed more than bullets. Go, Doc said. Jackson climbed into the driver's seat and accelerated away from the beach. Behind them, the compound was burning, and guards were shouting, and somewhere in that chaos, Viktor Belov was realizing he had been played by someone who wanted all of them dead. The safe house villa was 15 minutes away. 15 minutes of Jackson driving too fast on mountain roads while his son bled in the back, and Doc worked to keep him stable. Preacher's voice came over the radio. I am mobile, heading to Rally Point Alpha. Copy, Jackson said. Dad, what is your status? 3 guards tried to flank my position, James replied. His voice was calm. Past tense tried. I am displaced and moving to Rally Alpha. The villa appeared ahead. Jackson pulled the van into the garage and killed the engine. Preacher arrived 2 minutes later in a second rental car, face streaked with dirt and gunpowder residue. James appeared 5 minutes after that, moving like a man 40 years younger than 89, rifle slung and eyes bright with the adrenaline that age could not diminish. They carried Ryan inside and laid him on the couch. Doc cut away his shirt, exposing the shoulder wound. It was infected, red lines spreading from the entry hole. 3 months without proper treatment. 3 months of fighting infection with willpower alone. He needs surgery, Doc said. Real surgery, hospital surgery. I can stabilize him, but he needs more than I can provide here. How long does he have? Jackson asked. Hours, maybe a day. After that, sepsis will kill him. Jackson looked at his son lying on the couch, breathing shallow, skin pale as death. He had crossed an ocean to get here, had walked into a trap, had escaped with his life and his son. And now he was being told it might not be enough. His phone rang. Kellerman's number. Jackson answered but said nothing. I am watching satellite feeds of Belov's compound, Kellerman said. That was not negotiation. That was a disaster. That was an ambush, Jackson said. His voice was cold. Belov was set up. Someone fed him intelligence about Beirut. Someone told him I killed his brother. Someone wanted both of us dead. Want to guess who that someone was? Kellerman was quiet for 5 seconds. Jackson, you need to calm down and think clearly. I am thinking very clearly. Belov said he learned about Beirut 6 months ago. That mission was classified so deep it should not exist. Only someone with serious access could dig it up. Someone in CIA, someone who wanted to eliminate loose ends from Cold War operations. You are suggesting I set this up, Kellerman said. His voice was dangerous. You are suggesting I engineered an operation to kill you and Belov and your son. I am not suggesting anything. I am stating facts. Jackson looked at his father and Preacher and Doc. They were all watching him now, understanding what he was saying. Someone used Ryan as bait to bring me to Montenegro. Someone used me to bring Belov out of hiding. And now we are all supposed to die in a terrorist attack or a shootout, or however you were planning to stage it. You have lost your mind. Have I? Then explain how Belov got intelligence that should not exist. Explain why you sent me here alone with 3 retired operators instead of a full team. Explain why the extraction plan was deliberately vague. Jackson felt rage building. Explain why my son has been rotting in captivity for 3 months and you only decided to act now. Kellerman's voice went flat. You want an explanation. Here it is. You and your father and Belov are all veterans of operations that were never officially sanctioned. Black ops that, if exposed, would embarrass the United States government. Your existence is a liability. This was an opportunity to resolve multiple problems simultaneously. By killing us, by allowing events to take their natural course. But you survived. So now we go to contingency planning, which is what? You have 12 hours to get out of Montenegro. After that, I cannot guarantee your safety. Local authorities will be looking for American tourists involved in a firefight at a Russian arms dealer's compound. You will be arrested. You will be extradited. You will spend the rest of your life in a black site prison. Or you can disappear. New identities, new lives. The kind of retirement where you never speak about your service again. And Ryan, your son is a hero who died in combat in Afghanistan. He gets a star on the wall at Langley and a folded flag for you to remember him by. Jackson looked at Ryan lying on the couch, fighting for every breath. You want me to let him die? I want you to understand reality. Kellerman's voice was ice. You do not have options. You have 12 hours. Use them wisely. The line went dead. Jackson set down the phone very carefully because if he did not, he would throw it through the window. Around him, the villa was silent except for Ryan's labored breathing and the distant sound of sirens approaching the compound they had just escaped. Preacher spoke first. How many men does Kellerman have in Montenegro? Unknown, James said. He was at the window watching the road. But if he is cleaning house, he will have a team. Professional, well-equipped. They will hit us here or on the road. We need to move, Doc said. Even if we had time, Ryan cannot be moved. He is barely stable. Another hour of driving and he goes into shock. Then we do not drive, Jackson said. We find another way out. There is no other way out, Preacher said. We are on a peninsula, one road north, one road south. Both are choke points. If Kellerman has assets, they will be positioned on those roads. Then we do not take the roads. Jackson walked to the window and looked out at the bay, at the water, at the boats moving like white birds. We take the submarine. What submarine, Doc asked. The one at Belov's compound. Jackson turned to face them. Soviet Kilo class, diesel electric. I saw it in the sub pen when we were escaping. It was running. Belov was preparing to use it for something. You know how to drive a submarine, Preacher said. I drove one in 1985, CIA operation in the Black Sea. James looked at his son. You were not even born yet. That was 40 years ago, Doc said. Some things you do not forget, James replied. Like shooting, like swimming, like how to escape when the enemy has you surrounded. Jackson pulled out his phone and dialed a number he never thought he would call. It rang 3 times, then a voice answered, wary and rough. Shepard, Viktor Belov said. You are still alive. That is unfortunate for both of us. We need to talk, Jackson said. Face to face. One more time. No guns, no guards, just 2 old men figuring out who tried to kill us and why. Belov was quiet for a long moment. You think Kellerman betrayed us both? I know he did. He told me himself. We were loose ends, Cold War operators who knew too much. He wanted us dead and he used my son to make it happen. Another silence. Then Belov said, there is a church in the old town, St. Tryphon, small, quiet. Tourists do not go there in winter. Meet me in 1 hour. Come alone or come with your men. I do not care anymore. I just want truth. So do I, Jackson said. The line went dead. Jackson looked at his father and Preacher and Doc and his son lying barely alive on the couch. 4 old men and 1 young SEAL against whatever Kellerman had waiting in the shadows. We are going to need help, Jackson said. From who, Doc asked. We are alone here. No, we are not, James said. He was looking at his phone, at something Jackson could not see. Viktor Belov is not the only one who has resources in Montenegro. I know someone who owes me a favor from a long time ago. Who? James smiled without humor. The kind of people who do not ask questions when old warriors need weapons and a way out. The kind of people who remember when the world was simpler and enemies were clear. He looked at Jackson. We are going to steal that submarine. And then we are going to make Marcus Kellerman regret he ever thought Jackson Shepard was a man who could be erased. Outside the villa, the sun was setting over Montenegro. The Adriatic turned from blue to red to black. And somewhere in the darkness between what was and what came next, old men prepared for one more mission. One more fight. One more chance to prove that some wars never end and some warriors never quit until the last round is fired and the last target falls. Ryan stirred on the couch, opened his eyes. looked at his father standing at the window backlit by dying light. "Dad," Ryan whispered. His voice was barely audible. "Did we make it?" Jackson turned and knelt beside his son, put his hand on Ryan's face, felt the fever burning through his skin. "Not yet," Jackson said. "But we will. I promise you we will." Outside, sirens grew louder. Time was running out. The chase was beginning. And in the old town of Kotor, in a church older than the United States, Viktor Belov waited to learn if enemies could become allies when a greater enemy threatened them both. The Church of St. Tryphon stood in the heart of Kotor's old town, 1,200 years of stone and prayer and survival. It had outlasted Romans and Venetians and Ottomans and Nazis. It had survived earthquakes and wars and the slow, grinding passage of time that turned empires to dust. Now it would witness two old warriors deciding if they could trust each other long enough to survive the next 24 hours. Jackson Shepard sat in a pew near the back, alone, watching the door. The church was empty except for shadows and the smell of incense and centuries of human hope. Candles flickered near the altar, throwing light that barely reached the walls. Outside, the December evening was falling fast, tourists heading back to their hotels, locals closing their shops, the ancient town settling into another night. He had left his father and preacher and Doc at the villa with Ryan. Left them armed and watching the approaches because Kellerman's people would be coming, and when they came, it would be with overwhelming force. Doc had given Ryan 6 hours, maybe 8 if the antibiotics did their job. After that, sepsis would take him, and all of this would have been for nothing. The door opened. Viktor Belov entered alone, moving carefully, scanning the church interior the way soldiers never stop scanning. He wore dark clothes and his face showed exhaustion that matched what Jackson felt in his own bones. Two men in their 60s, both carrying wounds that did not show, and memories that weighed more than any pack they had ever humped through jungles or deserts or mountains. Belov sat in the pew across the aisle, did not look at Jackson, looked at the altar, at the icons painted in gold that had watched empires rise and fall. "Your son," Belov said, "he will live." Not a question. A statement that held something Jackson had not expected. Concern, maybe regret. "If I can get him to a hospital," Jackson replied. "But you cannot, because Kellerman has people watching the hospitals, watching the roads, waiting for you to make a mistake." Yes, they sat in silence for a long moment. Two enemies who were learning they might not be enemies after all. Just old men caught in games played by younger men who sent others to Tare while they sat in offices making PowerPoint presentations about acceptable casualties. "Kellerman called me," Belov said, 2 hours ago. "He told me you escaped. He told me I should finish what I started. Kill you and your son and eliminate witnesses to operations that never officially happened." "What did you say?" "I told him to go to hell." Belov finally turned to look at Jackson. "For 37 years, I believed you murdered my brother. I built my life around that hate, used it to fuel everything I did, and now I learn it was all manipulation. Someone fed me that intelligence. Someone wanted me to hate you. Someone wanted this exact outcome." "Who told you about Beirut?" Jackson asked. "Who gave you my name?" Belov reached into his jacket. Jackson tensed, but Belov pulled out only a phone. He scrolled through messages, found what he wanted, held it up. The message was encrypted, but Belov had a key. It showed a file. Classified CIA operation. Beirut, 1987. SEAL Team 6 assault. Hostile casualties. And there, in black and white, a name. Lieutenant Jackson Shepard. Team leader. Responsible for death of Soviet military advisor Dmitry Belov. "When did you receive this?" Jackson asked. 6 months ago. Anonymous source. Delivered through channels I use for intelligence purchases. I paid 50,000 euros for the file. And you never questioned it. Why would I? It had all the details. Dates, locations, operational codes. Everything that said it was genuine. Everything except one thing, Jackson said. The CIA would never document killing a Soviet advisor. That is the kind of operation that stays in people's heads, never on paper. The fact that this file exists means someone created it specifically to give you. Belov stared at the phone in his hand, then at Jackson. "You are saying Kellerman manufactured evidence. I am saying someone did. And Kellerman is the only person with access to create documents that would fool you. He set us both up. Used your brother's death and my son's capture to bring us together so we would kill each other and solve his problem." "What problem?" Jackson leaned back against the pew. Old operators who remember too much. You worked both sides during the Cold War. Ran weapons, moved intelligence, knew where bodies were buried. I did black ops that would embarrass 3 presidential administrations if they came to light. My father has secrets from Korea that could rewrite history books. We are all liabilities. Easier to stage our deaths than to trust we will stay quiet. So we are dead men, Belov said. No matter what we do. Not if we survive the next 24 hours. Not if we make enough noise that killing us becomes more trouble than letting us live. How? Jackson told him. About the submarine, about getting Ryan to a hospital, about needing Belov's help to pull off something impossible, because impossible was all they had left. When Jackson finished, Belov was quiet for a long time. Then he laughed. Not humor. The sound of a man recognizing absurdity. You want to steal my submarine, Belov said. I want to borrow it. You can have it back when we reach international waters and a Navy ship picks us up. And what do I get from this arrangement? You get to live. You get to expose Kellerman. You get to stop being a pawn in someone else's game. Belov met his eyes. And maybe you get closure. Not revenge, not justice, but knowing the truth about what happened to your brother. I already know the truth. You killed him. I killed a hostile in a war zone. I did not murder your brother. There is a difference. Is there? Belov stood, walked to the altar, looked up at icons that had watched human suffering for centuries. My brother was 20 years old. He played violin. He wanted to study medicine. KGB recruited him, told him he was serving his country, sent him to Lebanon, and he died in a room far from home, shot by a man who never knew his name. Jackson stood as well. I was 25. I wanted to be a teacher. Marine Corps recruited me, told me I was serving my country, sent me to Vietnam. I killed my first man when I was 19 years old. He was probably somebody's brother too. That is what war is. That is what we were. But we are not at war now. Are we not? Jackson gestured at the world beyond the church walls. Kellerman is trying to kill us. His people are out there right now, planning how to make our deaths look like accidents or terrorist attacks. If that is not war, then what is? Belov turned from the altar. How many men does your father have? 3. 4 counting Ryan, but he cannot fight. Doc is a medic, 61 years old. Preacher is 64, still dangerous with a rifle, but his knees are shot. My father is 89 and should be in a retirement home. And you are 62 with enough metal in your body to build a small car. Yes, against how many of Kellerman's men? Unknown. But if he is serious about cleaning up loose ends, he will send at least 20. Professionals. Well equipped. They will hit the villa or wait for us on the road. So we are outnumbered 4-1. We have a dying man, 4 old men, and a plan to steal a submarine. Belov smiled without warmth. I have been involved in many stupid operations. This may be the most stupid. Does that mean you are in? Belov walked back down the aisle, stopped next to Jackson's pew. I have 12 men left. The rest were killed or wounded when you escaped. They are not soldiers. They are security contractors, but they are loyal and they know how to fight. 12 plus 4 is 16, still outnumbered. Yes, but we have something Kellerman does not. What? We have nothing left to lose. Belov extended his hand. My compound has a submarine pen built into the cliff. Soviet-era construction. The submarine is fueled and ready. I was planning to use it to transport the plutonium. What plutonium? Jackson asked. The plutonium that does not exist. Another of Kellerman's lies. He told you I had weapons-grade material, told me I was brokering a deal, all of it manufactured to justify bringing us together. Belov's face was stone. He has been playing both sides, probably for years, and we were too stupid to see it. Jackson shook Belov's hand. It was like gripping weathered wood, hard and dry and strong, in the way that only old men who have survived everything can be strong. We have maybe 4 hours before Kellerman's people find the villa, Jackson said. We need to move Ryan now. Get to your compound. Use the submarine to escape before they can stop us. They will try to stop us at the compound. Belov released Jackson's hand. It is the obvious move. Set up around the submarine pen, wait for us to show, kill everyone. Simple and effective. Then we give them something else to think about, such as, Jackson smiled for the first time in days. We blow up the compound. They walked out of the church together, 2 old enemies becoming allies because the alternative was dying alone. The streets of Kotor were narrow and dark, cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of feet. Tourists took photographs of medieval architecture. Locals argued about soccer in cafes. Life continued because life always continued, indifferent to the small dramas of men trying not to die. Jackson called his father from a secure phone Belov provided. Status, James answered. We have an alliance. Belov is helping. We moved to his compound in 30 minutes. How is Ryan? Fading. Doc has him on every antibiotic we have, but the infection is winning. We need that hospital or we lose him. We will get him there. Be ready to move. Full kit. This is going to get loud. It is already loud. James paused. Jax, we have vehicles approaching from the north. 3 SUVs moving tactical. This is not police. This is Kellerman. How far? 2 kilometers, maybe 3 minutes. Hold them as long as you can. We are coming. Jackson ran. Belov ran beside him. 2 men in their 60s running like they were 20 again, pushing bodies that protested every step, ignoring the pain because pain was temporary and death was permanent. They reached Belov's vehicle, a Land Rover that had seen better years. Belov drove, fast, through streets too narrow for speed, scattering tourists, taking corners that made the tires scream. The villa appeared ahead. Jackson could see muzzle flashes from the roof where his father had taken position, could hear the distinctive crack of the M40, steady and patient, the sound of a man who had been shooting for 70 years and never forgot how. Belov skidded to a stop. They ran inside. Doc was at the door, rifle up, face grim. 3 vehicles, maybe 15 men, professionals. They are not rushing. They know we are trapped. Where is Preacher? Rear perimeter, making sure they do not flank us. And Ryan, Doc's face showed everything Jackson needed to know. He has maybe 2 hours. After that, his organs start shutting down. Then we move now. Jackson turned to Belov. Your men, where are they? Belov was already on his phone speaking rapid Serbian. He listened, nodded, hung up. 10 minutes. They are coming from the compound. 12 men, 3 vehicles, heavy weapons. That gives us numbers parity. Jackson moved to the window, looked out at the approaching vehicles. They had stopped 300 meters away, just out of effective rifle range. Setting up. Planning. The hallmark of professionals who did not rush into situations they did not understand. On the roof, James fired. A windshield shattered on one of the SUVs. Someone screamed. The vehicles reversed quickly, getting back behind cover. They will probe us, Jackson said. Test our defenses. Look for weak points. When they find them, they will hit hard. How long can we hold? Belov asked. Depends on what they bring. If they have RPGs, we are done. This villa will not stop rockets. If they are restricted to small arms, we can hold maybe 30 minutes. After that, we are out of ammunition. My men are 8 minutes out. Then we hold for 8 minutes. The attackers opened fire. Not concentrated. Harassing fire. Rounds punching through windows, chewing up walls, forcing the defenders to keep their heads down. Jackson returned fire, short controlled bursts, making them respect the fact that old men could still shoot. Preacher's voice came over the radio. I have movement on the south side. 2 men trying to flank. Permission to engage. Granted, Jackson said. The Barrett M82 thundered from Preacher's position. The sound was so loud it hurt. One of the flanking attackers disappeared in a red mist. The other dove for cover, stayed there, decided flanking was a bad idea. From the roof, James was firing methodically. Not suppressive fire. Precision shots. Every round had a target. Every target went down or got behind better cover. At 89 years old, his eyes were not what they had been, but his hands were steady, and his judgment was eternal. I am out, James called down. 60 rounds. That is all I brought. Conserve them, Jackson replied. Only shoot what you can hit. That is what I have been doing. Vehicles appeared from the north. Belov's men. 3 Land Rovers identical to the one Belov drove. They came in fast, weapons out the windows, putting fire on Kellerman's attackers from an unexpected angle. Suddenly, 15 attackers were caught between 2 forces, and their careful setup became a chaos. Jackson saw the moment they decided to break contact. Saw the leader, a man in tactical gear with gray hair, give hand signals. Saw the 3 SUVs start moving, backing away, still firing but retreating. They are running, Doc said. No, Jackson watched them go. They are repositioning. They know where we are now. They know our strength. They will come back with a better plan. Belov's men pulled up to the villa. They were hard-looking men, the kind who had seen too much violence to be surprised by more. Their leader was a Serb named Marko, early 50s, Scar across his throat from something that should have killed him and did not. Marco looked at the villa, at the bullet holes, at Jackson and his people. This is all you have. 4 old men and a dying boy. This is all we have, Jackson confirmed. Marco grunted. Then we better move fast. Kellerman will have more people coming. Maybe police, maybe military. This place will be a graveyard in 1 hour. They loaded Ryan into one of the Land Rovers. Doc climbed in with him, continuing to work, hands steady even as the vehicle accelerated away from the villa. James descended from the roof, moving carefully, joints protesting. He handed the M40 to Jackson. 60 years I have carried this rifle, James said. Every war, every mission. Now I am too old to shoot it effectively. You just held off 15 men. I used to be able to hold off 50. James looked at his son. I am dying, Jax. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The doctors told me 6 months ago. Cancer, everywhere. They wanted to do chemotherapy. I told them to go to hell. Jackson felt the world tilt. You did not tell me, because there was nothing to tell. I am 89 years old. I have lived longer than any shepherd has a right to expect. When my time comes, I will meet it with my boots on, not in a hospital bed drooling on myself. Dad, do not. James put his hand on Jackson's shoulder. We have work to do. We get Ryan out. We get him to a hospital. We make sure he lives long enough to have sons of his own. That is what matters. The rest is just details. They drove in convoy toward Belov's compound. 3 vehicles, 16 men, 1 dying seal. The sun had set completely now, and Montenegro was dark except for scattered lights from towns clinging to hillsides. The Adriatic was black glass reflecting stars that had watched humans struggle for millennia and would continue watching long after they were all dust. Kellerman called Jackson's phone. Jackson let it ring 6 times before answering. You should have taken my offer, Kellerman said. 12 hours to disappear, new lives. But you chose to make this difficult. You chose to make this impossible when you decided we were disposable, Jackson replied. How many men did you send? 15, 20. How many are you willing to lose to cover up your mistakes? As many as it takes, Kellerman's voice was ice. You think you can steal Belov's submarine and escape? You think the United States Navy will protect you? You are wrong. I have already alerted the Navy that a stolen Soviet submarine with a rogue CIA officer aboard will be attempting to reach international waters. They will sink you on sight. You are bluffing. Am I? Try me. See what happens when you surface in the Adriatic and an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer puts a harpoon missile through your hull. Your son will drown in the dark, and you will have killed him yourself. The line went dead. Jackson sat holding the phone, feeling the trap close tighter. Kellerman had blocked every move. The roads were watched. The hospitals were covered. Even the ocean was no longer an escape route. We are running out of options, Doc said from the back seat where he worked on Ryan. Then we make new options, Jackson said. They reached Belov's compound at 2300 hours. The place was shot up and burning in spots where preachers' incendiary rounds had started fires. Dead guards lay where they had fallen during the earlier fight. The smell of cordite and blood hung in the air. Belov led them through the compound to the cliff edge where a steel door was built into the rock face. He entered a code on a keypad. The door opened with a hydraulic hiss, revealing a tunnel sloping down into darkness. This was built by Yugoslavian military in 1973, Belov said. Submarine pen designed to hide vessels from American satellites. It can hold 1 kilo-class submarine. The submarine has fuel for 2,000 kilometers, enough to reach Italy or Greece. And then what, Preacher asked. Kellerman will have people waiting at every port. Then we do not go to a port. Jackson looked at the tunnel entrance. We go to open ocean. We surface and transmit evidence of Kellerman's betrayal on every frequency we can find. We make so much noise that killing us becomes more trouble than it is worth. That is assuming we make it out of the pen, Marco said. Kellerman's people will be waiting. They will hit us during transit, when we are most vulnerable. Then we give them a reason not to, Belov said. We blow the compound, make them think we died in the explosion. While they are confirming body count, we take the submarine and run. Jackson looked at the Russian arms dealer who had been his enemy 6 hours ago. You would destroy your own compound. It is just a building. Buildings can be replaced. Lives cannot. Belov looked at Ryan unconscious in Doc's arms. Your son is 26 years old. My brother was 20. Neither of them deserve what happened to them. But maybe we can make sure Ryan has a chance Dmitri never got. They carried Ryan down the tunnel. It was steep and narrow, lit by emergency lights that barely worked. Water dripped from the ceiling. The air smelled of diesel and salt and age. The tunnel opened into a cavern that took Jackson's breath away. The submarine pen was enormous, 200 meters deep, carved from living rock, with a vaulted ceiling that disappeared into darkness. In the center, floating in dark water, was a Kilo-class submarine. 60 meters of Soviet engineering, diesel-electric propulsion, designed to be silent and deadly. It looked ancient and menacing, like something that had crawled out of the Cold War and refused to die. "Get him aboard," Doc said. "I need flat surface and light. I need to operate." "You cannot operate here," Jackson said. "We need a hospital." "There is no hospital that will not have Kellerman's people watching." Doc's face was stone. "I have been a combat medic for 30 years. I have done surgery in foxholes and helicopters and the backs of trucks. I can do this if you give me 2 hours in a steady platform." "The submarine is not steady. Then I work while it moves." Doc looked at Jackson. "This is his only chance. You know that." They boarded the submarine through the sail hatch. Inside, it was cramped and dark and smelled like oil and sweat and decades of submariners living in a steel tube underwater. Belov moved to the control room with Marco and 2 other men who had submarine experience. Jackson helped Doc set up a makeshift surgical station in the crew quarters. Ryan lay on a bunk, unconscious, fever burning through him. Doc laid out instruments, scalpels, clamps, sutures, everything he would need to cut into his shoulder and clean out 3 months of infection. "I need everyone out," Doc said. "Jackson, your father, preacher, everyone except Marco to assist me. Too many people and I cannot work." Jackson looked at his son lying there dying and wanted to stay. Wanted to hold his hand and tell him it would be okay even though he did not know if that was true. But Doc needed space and concentration, and Jackson needed to help get the submarine moving before Kellerman's people found them. "Bring him back," Jackson said. "I will bring him back or die trying," Doc replied. In the control room, Belov was arguing with Marco in rapid Serbian. He switched to English when Jackson entered. "The reactor is cold. It takes 4 hours to bring it online. We cannot wait 4 hours. Can we move on battery? For 2 hours. Maybe 3. After that, we are dead in the water. 2 hours gets us 10 kilometers offshore, into international waters. That is far enough to transmit and hope someone is listening. And if no one listens, then we die in a submarine in the Adriatic. But at least we die trying." Belov looked at Jackson for a long moment. Then he smiled. "You are insane. I learned from the best." Jackson gestured at his father, who was wedged into a corner of the control room, looking at displays and controls that were all in Cyrillic. "My father once drove a submarine out of Sevastopol harbor with the entire Soviet Black Sea Fleet looking for him. If he can do that, we can do this." James looked up from the controls. "That was 1985 and I was 53 years old. Now I am 89 and half blind, but the principles are the same. Point the boat toward open water and try not to hit anything." Belov began giving orders to his men. They moved through the submarine bringing systems online, ballast pumps, trim tanks, navigation, communications. The old diesel engines coughed to life, loud and rough. The sound of machinery that should have been scrapped decades ago, but was still working because Soviet engineering built things to last forever. Outside the submarine pen Kellerman's people were setting up. 20 men, maybe more. They had found the tunnel entrance. Were preparing to breach, waiting for orders, wondering why anyone would try to escape in a submarine when there was nowhere to go. Belov had left surprises throughout the compound. Explosives placed during years of paranoia. Enough C4 to bring down buildings. Enough fuel barrels positioned strategically to create an inferno. He held a detonator in his hand, looking at it like he was holding his entire life. "This is my home," Belov said. 30 years I have lived here, built my business, made my fortune. Now I destroy it to save men I barely know." "You are not destroying it to save us," Jackson said. "You are destroying it because Kellerman thinks he can use us and throw us away. You are destroying it because someone needs to stand up and say no." Belov nodded slowly, then pressed the detonator. The world came apart. Explosions rippled through the compound above them, tearing buildings into pieces, igniting fuel depots, creating a fireball that lit up the Montenegrin night like a small sun. The shockwave traveled through the rock, shaking the submarine pen. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling. Men grabbed for handholds. "Jesus," Preacher whispered. "Cast off," Belov shouted. "Move, move, move." Marco's men released the mooring lines. The submarine drifted away from the dock. Belov worked the controls, ancient but functional, guiding the boat toward the tunnel that led to open water. The tunnel was barely wide enough, 20 meters of clearance on each side. Scraping rock would tear open the hull, and they would sink before they cleared the pen. Jackson stood behind Belov, watching the depth gauge, watching the speed indicator, watching a 63-year-old Russian arms dealer drive a Cold War submarine through a tunnel that should have collapsed decades ago. The tunnel was 300 meters long, carved at an angle so submarines could submerge before reaching open water. Navigate by instruments because no periscope could see in this darkness. Trust the charts. Trust the engineering. Trust that men who built this 50 years ago knew what they were doing. 200 meters. The tunnel walls closed in. Something scraped along the starboard side, a sound like fingernails on a chalkboard. The submarine shuddered but kept moving. 100 meters. The diesel engines were screaming now, pushing the boat faster than it was designed to go underwater. Temperature gauges climbing into red. Oil pressure dropping, systems failing one by one. 50 meters. Light appeared ahead. Not sunlight. The blue glow of bioluminescence in the Adriatic. The tunnel mouth. Freedom or death depending on what waited outside. They cleared the tunnel, burst into open water. Belov immediately took the submarine down, diving fast, pushing for depth. 100 meters, 200, 300. The hull groaned under pressure. Rivets creaked. Somewhere in the back, a pipe burst and water began spraying. Level off, James said calmly. This hull is not rated for deeper than 300. Go further and we implode. Belov leveled off at 290 meters. They hung there in darkness, engines shut down, running silent. Above them, the surface world continued. Below them, the bottom of the Adriatic waited with open arms. Doc's voice came over the internal communications. I need to know if we are going to survive this, because if we are not, I need to tell Ryan goodbye. We are going to survive, Jackson said. How is he? Surgery is done, infection is out. I cannot do more here. He needs real hospital. Blood transfusion, IV antibiotics. He has maybe 12 hours. Then we have 12 hours to make this work. Jackson looked at Belov. Can we transmit from here? No, too deep. We need to surface to get antenna above water. How long before Kellerman's people find us? They already know where we are. Submarines are not invisible. They will have patrol boats, helicopters, maybe a destroyer. Belov checked his instruments. We have 2 hours of battery. We can run or we can transmit, not both. Then we transmit. We tell the world what Kellerman did. We make so much noise they have to respond. And if they sink us anyway, then we die knowing we tried. James moved to the communications station, started bringing systems online. The submarine had been fitted with modern upgrades, satellite communications, encrypted transmissions. All the technology an arms dealer needed to conduct business from international waters. I need 30 minutes to break encryption, James said. Then I can transmit on every NATO frequency, every news network, every military channel. They will not be able to ignore it. You have 30 minutes, Jackson said. Time crawled by. The submarine hung in darkness while above them the world searched. Sonar pings echoed through the hull. Active sonar, boats looking for them, getting closer. The pings came faster, more urgent. They had been found. 20 minutes, James said. I need 20 more minutes. We do not have 20 minutes, Marco said. He was at the sonar station watching the display. I have multiple contacts. 3 patrol boats, 2 helicopters, and something bigger. Destroyer class. They are forming perimeter. Then we run, Belov said. No, Jackson looked at his father hunched over the communications console, fingers moving across keyboard, doing work that should have been impossible for an 89-year-old man, but was not because shepherds did not quit. We hold. We give him time. They will kill us. They are going to kill us anyway. At least this way we make them work for it. A sound like thunder rolled through the water. Depth charges. Not close. Warning shots. Telling them to surface. Telling them the game was over. 15 minutes, James said. Jackson moved through the submarine checking on his people. Preacher in the engine room nursing dying diesel engines. Marco and his men at battle stations they hoped never to use. Doc with Ryan in the crew quarters, holding the young SEAL's hand, whispering prayers or promises or both. Ryan's eyes fluttered open, focused on Doc, then passed him to Jackson standing in the doorway. Dad, Ryan said. His voice was barely audible. Did we make it? Not yet. but we will. I'm sorry for not being the son you wanted. Jackson knelt beside the bunk. You were exactly the son I wanted. Strong and brave and better than I ever was. Everything I did, every choice I did it so you could have a world worth living in. I just wish I had been there more to tell you that. You were there when it mattered, Ryan said. You are here now. Another depth charge. Closer. The submarine shook. Lights flickered. A control panel sparked and went dark. 10 minutes, James called out. They do not have 10 minutes, Belov said. Next depth charge will be on top of us. We surface or we die. Then we die, Jackson said. Because surfacing means Kellerman wins. Means everyone who ever trusted us died for nothing. Means Ryan fought for 3 months just to watch his father give up at the end. I am not giving up, Belov said. I am being realistic. Realistic got us into this situation. Jackson looked at the Russian. Now we need to be impossible. The final depth charge fell directly above them. The explosion was enormous. The submarine lurched sideways. Men were thrown across the deck. Pipes burst, water sprayed from a dozen places. The lights went out completely. Emergency batteries kicked in, casting everything in red. Hold breach, Marco shouted. Forward compartment, we are flooding. Close the bulkhead, Belov ordered. Seal it. There are men in that compartment. Close it or we all die. Marco hesitated, then pulled the lever. The bulkhead door slammed shut with the finality of a coffin lid, sealing 2 of his men to drown in darkness, saving the rest. The mathematics of survival, the calculations warriors made and then lived with forever. 5 minutes, James said. His voice was steady despite the chaos. 5 minutes and I can transmit everything. Time stopped having meaning. Jackson stood in the control room of a dying submarine with his dying father and his dying son and men he had known for days who were willing to do up for something they barely understood. He thought about Laura, about all the times he had chosen war over her, about all the times he had believed the mission mattered more than the moment. And he understood with perfect clarity that he had been wrong, that moments were all that ever mattered, that this moment, right now, drowning in the Adriatic with the people who mattered most, was the only moment that was real. 3 minutes, James said. The submarine settled on the bottom, 290 meters deep, systems failing, water rising, the end approaching with the patience of tide. 2 minutes. Jackson moved to stand behind his father, put his hand on the old man's shoulder. James reached up and covered Jackson's hand with his own. Father and son, warrior and warrior, 2 men who had spent their lives fighting only to learn that the fight never ended. It just changed shape, became something different, became this. 1 minute. The control room was silent except for the sound of water finding its way through hull plates. The sound of the ocean reclaiming what man had borrowed. The sound of time running out. James pressed enter. The transmission began. Encrypted files uploading to satellites. Broadcasting on every frequency. Evidence of Kellerman's betrayal. Proof of operations that should never have happened. Names and dates and locations. Everything that would make killing them more trouble than letting them live. Transmission complete, James said. Now the world knows. And if no one cares, Preacher said, then at least we tried. Jackson looked at the men around him, Belov who had lost a brother, Marco who had just sealed 2 of his own men to die, Preacher and Doc who had come because brothers answered when brothers called. His father who at 89 was still the finest warrior Jackson had ever known. And somewhere in the crew quarters, his son who had survived 3 months of hell, only to face drowning in darkness. This is not how I thought it would end, Jackson said. His father smiled. It never is. The submarine settled on the bottom of the Adriatic like a dying animal, finding a place to rest. 290 meters of water, pressed down with the weight of judgment. In the red emergency lighting, every face looked like a ghost. The sound of water finding its way through compromised hull plates was the sound of time running out in gallons per minute. Jackson Shepard stood in the control room watching the depth gauge and thinking about drowning. He had been shot at in 3 wars, had jumped out of helicopters and airplanes, had fought hand-to-hand with men trying to kill him, but he had never been trapped underwater in a steel coffin waiting for the ocean to claim him. This was a new kind of dying, slow, inevitable, mathematical. Forward compartment is completely flooded, Marco reported. His voice was steady, but his eyes showed what it cost to seal 2 of his own men behind that bulkhead. Water is spreading to the battery compartment. When it reaches the batteries, we will have toxic gas. Chlorine. It will kill us in minutes. How long do we have? Belov asked. 30 minutes, maybe less. James Shepard sat at the communications console watching the screen, waiting for some response to the transmission he had just sent. Evidence of Marcus Kellerman's betrayal. Proof of illegal operations spanning 4 decades. Names, dates, locations. Everything that should force the United States government to acknowledge what was happening and call off the kill teams. The screen remained blank. No response. No acknowledgement. Just silence. They are not coming, Preacher said. He stood near the periscope mount, rifle across his chest, even though there was nothing to shoot down here. We are on our own. We have always been on our own, Jackson replied. Every mission, every war. They send us into hell and then pretend we were never there. Why should this be different? Because we are drowning, Doc said from the doorway to the crew compartments. Because Ryan has maybe 8 hours left. Because we are old men who should have died in wars that ended before most people were born. But we did not die then, and we are not dying now. Not like this. Jackson looked at Doc, 61 years old, hands that had saved hundreds of lives in combat, face that showed every one of those lives as a weight he carried. How is Ryan? Stable. For now. Surgery was successful, but he needs hospital care. Blood transfusion. Real antibiotics. If we do not get him there soon, all I did was delay the inevitable. Then we find a way off this boat. Jackson turned to Belov. Is there emergency escape equipment? Belov nodded toward a hatch in the ceiling. Escape trunk, designed for a crew to exit if submarine is disabled on bottom. It can cycle 4 men at a time, uses compressed air to create airlock. Men go up in pairs wearing emergency breathing apparatus. From 300 meters depth, Marco said. That is insane. The pressure will kill them. Nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, decompression sickness. They will be dead before they reach surface. James looked up from the communications console. Not if they do it correctly. Free ascent from 300 meters is possible. We did it in training. 1968. SEAL program was testing deep water escape procedures. I was the oldest man to complete the evolution. 53 years ago, his eyes found Jackson. I can do it again. Dad, you are 89 years old. You have cancer. This will kill you. So will staying here. James stood slowly, joints protesting. I will go first. Test the procedure. If I make it, others follow. If I do not, you know the escape option is not viable. No, Jackson said. The word came out harder than he intended. You are not doing this. I am not losing you and Ryan in the same day. You do not get to choose. James moved toward the escape trunk. I am the oldest, the weakest. If I can survive the ascent, anyone can. It is simple logic. It is suicide. Then I will die doing something useful instead of drowning in the dark. James looked at his son with eyes that had seen 70 years of war and never flinched. You have spent your whole life following my example. Do not stop now. Let me do this. The water was ankle deep now in the control room. Rising, the submarine creaked and groaned, hull plates shifting under pressure. Somewhere aft, a pipe burst with the sound of a gunshot. Men flinched. 5 minutes to battery compartment breach, Marco said. Then we have chlorine gas. We need to decide. Belov stepped forwards. I will go with the colonel. 2 men test the ascent. If we survive, others follow in pairs. If we do not, you seal the escape trunk and try to find another way. There is no other way, Jackson said. But his voice had changed. He knew his father was right. Knew that sometimes the only choice was between dying slow or dying fast, and maybe dying fast gave others a chance to live. Ryan, James said. Where is he? Crew quarters. Doc has him sedated. He cannot climb the escape trunk. Then we get him there, between escapes. But he goes with someone who can manage him if he panics during ascent. James looked at Preacher. You dove in the Navy, free ascent procedure. Not from 300 meters. Not with a wounded man. Preacher shook his head. But yes, I will take him up. Doc goes with the first group, Jackson said. He gets to surface, calls for help, makes sure there is medical support waiting when Ryan arrives. And you, Belov asked Jackson, when do you go? Last. Someone has to make sure everyone gets off. That is what team leaders do. The water was at their knees now. Cold. The kind of cold that made your muscles stop working. Made your mind slow down. Made you want to lie down and sleep and let it take you. James and Belov moved to the escape trunk. Marco helped them into emergency breathing apparatus, old Soviet equipment that might work or might fail, and there was no way to know until they were in the water ascending toward a surface 300 meters away. The apparatus was simple: a vest with a small tank of compressed air, a mouthpiece, a buoyancy control that would help regulate ascent speed. All of it designed in 1970s by engineers who had never done a free ascent from this depth and were probably long dead. James looked at Jackson before he climbed into the escape trunk. "Remember what I taught you about shooting, about living, about being a man." He reached out and gripped Jackson's shoulder one last time. "You have been a good son, better than I deserved. Tell Ryan I am proud of him, proud of you both." "Dad," Jackson said, but he did not know what else to say. A lifetime of words unsaid, a lifetime of I love yous that were assumed but never spoken because warriors did not say such things, did not acknowledge that every goodbye might be permanent. "I know," James said. "I always knew." Then he climbed into the escape trunk with Belov. Marco sealed the lower hatch, started the flooding procedure. Water poured in through valves, filling the small chamber, equalizing pressure. When the chamber was full and the pressure was equal to the water outside, the upper hatch would open and they would swim out into darkness, in death, or salvation, depending on what physics and aging bodies could accomplish. The chamber filled, pressure gauge climbed, 5 atmospheres, 10, 15, 20. At 29 atmospheres, the upper hatch opened. James and Belov swam out into the Adriatic. Jackson watched on the external camera feed, 2 figures ascending through darkness, rising slowly. Too fast and the pressure change would kill them. Too slow and they would run out of air. It was a calculation measured in breaths, in depth, and the margin for error was measured in seconds. 100 meters. They were still ascending, still alive. 200 meters. James was struggling. Jackson could see it even on the grainy feed. His father's movements were slower, less coordinated. Nitrogen narcosis setting in. The rapture of the deep. The feeling that everything was fine and you should just stop swimming and rest because rest sounded good. 250 meters. Belov grabbed to James, pulled him, kept him moving. 2 old enemies who had become brothers pulling each other toward the light. 270 meters. Almost there. So close. Jackson found himself holding his breath, found himself praying to gods he had stopped believing in after Laura died. 280 meters. Surface was right there, right there. They broke through, 2 figures on the surface, treading water, alive. Jackson let out the breath he had been holding. Around him, men were cheering. Marco was laughing. Even Preacher allowed himself a smile. The escape trunk was cycling again, bringing back the emergency breathing apparatus, preparing for the next group. Doc and one of Marco's men, a Serb named Dragan, who was young enough that 300-meter ascent might not kill him. "You have to stabilize Ryan for the ascent," Jackson said to Doc. "If he panics or fights Preacher, they both die." "I know." Doc was preparing syringes, sedatives, enough to keep Ryan calm, but not so much it suppressed his breathing. It is a balance. Too much and he stops breathing. Too little and he panics. "Trust your training." My training was 40 years ago in field hospitals, where if someone died, there were 3 more wounded waiting. This is different. This is your son, which is why I trust you, Jackson said, because you understand what is at stake. Doc nodded once, then climbed into the escape trunk with Dragan. The chamber flooded, pressure equalized. They ascended. Jackson watched on the camera feed, holding his breath again, waiting for something to go wrong because experience taught you that things went wrong, and hope was for people who had not seen what he had seen. But Doc and Dragan made it, broke surface, joined James and Belov treading water in the December Adriatic. 4 men alive when they should have been dead. 4 men who had beaten physics through stubbornness and luck, and the kind of determination that kept warriors fighting long after reason said to quit. The water in the control room was waist deep. The submarine was dying faster now. The angles were wrong. They were settling bow down, sliding deeper. If they waited much longer, the escape trunk would be too deep, the pressure too great, the ascent impossible. "Ryan next," Jackson said. "Then Marco and his men, then me." "No," Preacher said. "You and Ryan. I will go last. Make sure everyone gets off. That is my job. Your job is to be a father. Mine is to be a warrior." Preacher met his eyes. "Besides, I am 64. You are 62, 2 years younger. You get priority." That is the stupidest logic I have ever heard. Welcome to the infantry. They moved to the crew quarters where Ryan lay on a bunk, pale as death, breathing shallow. Doc had left instructions. Dosages, timing. Jackson prepared the syringe with hands that wanted to shake, but could not be allowed to. He injected Ryan with enough sedative to keep him calm during ascent, enough to make him compliant, but not enough to stop him from breathing, not enough to kill him while trying to save him. The line was thin, the margin for error was non-existent. Ryan's eyes fluttered open, focused on Jackson with difficulty. "Dad," Ryan whispered, "what is happening?" "We are leaving. You and me. Going up. Going home. I am tired. I know. But you need to stay awake a little longer. Can you do that for me?" Ryan nodded, tried to sit up. Jackson helped him, feeling how light his son had become. 3 months of captivity. 3 months of barely eating. 3 months of surviving on will alone. How much will was left? How much longer could he hold on? They moved to the escape trunk. Preacher was already there wearing the emergency breathing apparatus, checking equipment with the methodical care of a man who knew that details mattered and carelessness killed. "Stay with me," Preacher said to Ryan. "I will be right beside you. If you panic, I grab you. If you try to swim too fast, I slow you down. If you stop swimming, I pull you. Understand?" Ryan nodded. His eyes were unfocused. The sedative was working, maybe too well. They climbed into the escape trunk. Preacher first, then Ryan, then Jackson, because he was not letting his son do this without him. Not after everything. Marco sealed the lower hatch. The chamber began to flood. The water was cold enough to stop your heart. Jackson felt it rising, felt Ryan tense beside him, felt Preacher's hand on Ryan's shoulder, steadying him, reminding him he was not alone. The pressure began to build, ears popping, head pounding, the weight of the ocean pressing in from all sides. At 29 atmospheres, the upper hatch opened and they swam out into darkness. Jackson had done night dives, had done deep dives, but never both at once with a wounded son and 300 meters of water between him and air. The ascent was measured in heartbeats, in breaths from the emergency apparatus, in the feeling of lungs wanting to burst and legs wanting to stop kicking. Ryan was struggling. Jackson could see it even in the darkness. His son's movements were uncoordinated. Panic setting in despite the sedative, despite Preacher holding him, despite Jackson swimming beside him. They passed 100 meters, 200 meters. The surface was a lighter darkness above them. So close, so impossibly far. At 250 meters, Ryan stopped swimming. Just stopped. Hung in the water like he had decided this was far enough. Like the pain and exhaustion had won and surrender was easier than fighting. Preacher grabbed him, pulled. But Ryan was dead weight. The sedative and exhaustion and 3 months of hell had finally broken something that could not be fixed by will alone. Jackson grabbed his son's other arm. Together he and Preacher pulled, kicked, fought their way up through water that felt like concrete. Jackson's lungs were screaming. His legs were cramping. His vision was narrowing to a tunnel. But he did not stop, would not stop, could not stop because stopping meant losing Ryan, and he had not crossed an ocean and survived Belov and escaped Kellerman just to watch his son drown 50 meters from safety. 270 meters. Ryan was convulsing now, seizure or panic or both. His emergency breathing apparatus had come loose. Water was in his lungs. He was drowning in Jackson's arms. 20 more meters, 15, 10. They broke surface. Jackson ripped off his mouthpiece, grabbed Ryan's face, tilted his head back, started rescue breathing. 2 breaths, checked for pulse. 2 more breaths. Preacher was treading water beside them, supporting Ryan's body, keeping him afloat. "Come on," Jackson shouted. "Come on, kid, breathe." Ryan's chest convulsed. Water came up. Then he was coughing, gasping, sucking in air with the desperate hunger of a man returned from the dead. "I got you," Jackson said. His voice broke. "I got you. You are okay. You are going to be okay." 200 meters away, a ship was approaching. Not a patrol boat. Something bigger. A destroyer. USS Roosevelt. Arleigh Burke class. 500 feet of American naval power. Jackson could see the hull number. Could see sailors lining the rails. Could see a rescue boat being lowered. But he also saw the forward gun turret traversing. Saw the 5-inch cannon pointing in their direction, saw what Kellerman had promised. The Navy had been told a stolen Soviet submarine with rogue operators was in the area, had been told to sink it on sight. The submarine was still down there. Marco and his remaining men were still inside, still trying to escape, and the Roosevelt was about to put a round through it and kill everyone still aboard. Jackson looked around, saw James treading water 50 meters away, saw Doc and Belov and the others, saw his father looking at the destroyer with the same realization. "They are going to fire," James called out. "We need to signal. Let them know we are American." Jackson pulled off his emergency vest, the bright orange color that marked it as safety equipment, waved it over his head, shouted even though he knew they were too far away to hear. "Do not fire. Americans in the water. Do not fire." The destroyer's forward turret stopped traversing. Someone on the bridge had seen them. The rescue boat was moving faster now, racing toward them. 2 minutes away, maybe less. The submarine was imploding. Jackson could hear it even from the surface. The sound of metal giving way. The sound of pressure winning. The sound of men dying in darkness. He watched the surface where the submarine had been, waiting for Marco and his men to appear. They did not appear. The rescue boat arrived, Navy SEALs in the water, young men, fit, efficient. They grabbed Ryan first, pulled him into the boat, started working on him with equipment and training, and the kind of focus that came from doing this 1,000 times in training and 100 times for real. Jackson climbed aboard last, looked back at the water, still no sign of Marco. He counted heads. James, Belov, Doc, Drogan, Preacher, Ryan. 7 men had escaped. 8 were still down there. 8 men who would not be coming home. The destroyer's crane lifted them from the rescue boat to the deck. Corman took Ryan immediately, rushing him below decks to the medical bay. Doc went with them, still working, still fighting to keep Jackson's son alive. James sat on the deck, wrapped in a thermal blanket, shaking from cold and exertion, and 89 years of life catching up all at once. Jackson sat beside him. "You did it," Jackson said. 300-meter free ascent at 89 years old. "You actually did it. I have done stupider things." James looked at his son. "Is Ryan going to make it?" "I do not know." Jackson felt exhaustion crashing over him like waves. "I do not know anything anymore, except that I am tired." The destroyer's captain appeared, a woman, early 40s, commander's insignia on her collar, face that showed she had questions and intended to get answers. "I am Commander Sarah Chen, USS Roosevelt." She looked at the 7 men wrapped in thermal blankets on her deck. "Someone want to tell me what the hell is happening? I received orders to sink a stolen Soviet submarine. Then I receive encrypted transmissions claiming CIA conspiracy. Then I have 7 men surface from 300 meters. One of them is a retired SEAL I recognize from the wall at Coronado." She looked at Jackson. "You are Jackson Shepard. You have been dead for 3 months according to official records." "The reports of my death were greatly exaggerated," Jackson said. "We need to talk. Privately. About Marcus Kellerman and operations that should never have happened." Chen studied him for a long moment, then nodded once. "My ready room. 10 minutes. Get dry. Get warm. Then you tell me everything." The ready room was small and efficient. Chen sat behind a desk covered in charts and reports. Jackson and James and Belov sat across from her, still wrapped in blankets, still shaking from cold and exhaustion, still alive when they should not be. Jackson told her everything. Ryan's capture, Kellerman's setup, the meeting with Belov, the escape from the compound, the submarine, the transmission, all of it. When he finished, Chen was quiet for a long time. "That is one hell of a story," she said finally. "Problem is I have no way to verify it. For all I know, you are exactly what Kellerman says. Rogue operators stealing a submarine. The encrypted transmission could be fabricated." "Check the files," James said. His voice was rough with exhaustion. "Verify the operations. Check the dates. The names. Everything we sent you is real. Everything Kellerman told you is lies." "I intend to check, but that takes time." Chen leaned forward. "What I know right now is I have a dying SEAL in my medical bay. I have 7 men who should be dead. I have a destroyed submarine on the bottom of the Adriatic, and I have orders from someone high up in the chain of command telling me to detain you all pending investigation." "Then detain us," Jackson said. "But save my son first. Get him to a hospital. He has nothing to do with this. He was captured in Afghanistan, held hostage. He is a victim." That much I can verify, Chen said. She pulled up a file on her computer. Petty Officer First Class Ryan Shepard, SEAL Team 6, MIA, 3 months ago during operation in Helmand Province. Listed as KIA, presumed 2 weeks ago. She looked up. Except now he is in my medical bay dying from septic infection. Want to explain how a dead man ended up in the Adriatic? Because someone wanted him to stay dead, Belov said. Because someone wanted all of us to disappear, to be erased, to stop being problems. And you are, Chen asked. Viktor Belov, Russian arms dealer, former Spetsnaz, CIA asset from 1991 to 2012, until Marcus Kellerman burned me to cover his own operations. You expect me to believe that? No. Belov met her eyes. I expect you to verify it. Call your intelligence officers. Run my name, check the files. Everything I am telling you is true. Everything Kellerman told you is lies. Chen stood, walked to the window, looked out at the Adriatic. I am going to make some calls. You are all confined to quarters pending investigation. No communication off ship. No contact with each other. If your story checks out, we proceed accordingly. If it does not, you face charges for theft of a foreign submarine, conspiracy, and whatever else the JAG can come up with. She looked at Jackson. Your son is in surgery now. My corpsmen are good, but he needs a real hospital. We are 12 hours from Napoli. I am running full speed. He should make it. Should. That is the best I can offer. Chen moved toward the door. Get some rest. This is going to be a long day. They were given separate quarters. Small berths meant for junior officers. Jackson lay on a rack that was too short and stared at the ceiling. His body hurt everywhere. His shoulder was throbbing where the plate was. His knee felt like broken glass. 62 years old, and he had just survived things that should have killed men half his age. He thought about Laura, about what she would say if she could see him now. Probably something about being a damn fool, about risking his life for a job that never loved him back, about choosing war over peace, even in retirement because he did not know how to be anything except a warrior. She would be right. She always was. But she would also understand. Would know that Ryan was worth any risk. Would know that some fights could not be walked away from. Would know that Jackson Shepard was exactly the man she had married. Flawed and stubborn and incapable of quitting even when quitting was the smart choice. Someone knocked on the door. Jackson opened it to find Preacher standing there, also in borrowed Navy fatigues. How you holding up? Preacher asked. Like I got hit by a train. You. Like I got hit by 2 trains. Preacher came in, sat on the small chair that was the only furniture besides the rack. Chen is making calls. To Washington, to Langley, to anyone who will listen. Think they will believe us. Preacher shrugged. Depends on how much evidence we sent. Depends on who receives it. Depends on whether the truth matters more than protecting the agency. The truth never matters more than protecting the agency, Jackson said. That is why we are here. That is why good men die while bad men make policy. Maybe. But sometimes good men get lucky. Sometimes the right person receives the right information at the right time and does the right thing. We have to believe that, or nothing we did means anything. 6 hours later, Commander Chen called them to the ready room again. This time there were others present, intelligence officers, JAG, the destroyer's executive officer. The room was crowded with people who looked like they had not slept. Chen did not waste time. I have spent the last 6 hours on secure calls with people whose names I cannot mention. I have verified major portions of your story. Marcus Kellerman was running unsanctioned operations, black ops that were never officially approved. Money was moving through accounts that should not exist. Weapons were being sold to groups we are supposed to be fighting. So you believe us, James said. I believe you are telling the truth about Kellerman. Chen pulled up a photo on her screen. The problem is Kellerman has disappeared. As of 4 hours ago, he is in the wind. His office at Langley is empty. His apartment is cleared out. His financials show large transfers to offshore accounts over the past 6 months. He knew this was coming, and he prepared. He is running, Jackson said. He is gone. Chen switched to another screen. But he left a trail. Bank accounts, safe houses, contacts in Eastern Europe. We have people working it, but he has 40 years of experience running operations. He knows how to disappear. What about Ryan? Doc asked. How is he? Stable. My corpsman did excellent work. The infection is under control. He needs additional surgery and weeks of recovery, but he should make a full recovery. Chen looked at Jackson. Your son is going to live. Jackson felt something break inside him. The tension he had been holding for 3 days. The fear that he had crossed an ocean and survived impossible odds only to lose Ryan at the end. He put his face in his hands, and for the first time since Laura died, he cried. Not quiet tears, deep sobs that came from someplace beyond words. The sound of a father who had been holding on too tight for too long. James put his hand on Jackson's shoulder. Let him sit there, let him feel it. Because warriors earn the right to break after holding the line. Earn the right to be human after being inhuman for so long. When Jackson could breathe again, he looked up. Thank you for saving him, for believing us, for doing the right thing when it would have been easier to follow orders. I did not do it for you, Chen said. I did it because the evidence is overwhelming. Because 16 years in the Navy taught me the difference between orders that should be followed and orders that should be questioned. She stood. You are all free to go. No charges, no investigation. As far as official records show, you were never here. The submarine never existed. This never happened. And Kellerman, Belov asked, gets to run, gets to hide, gets to live free while 8 good men died in that submarine. Chen's face showed what she thought of that. But that is above my pay grade. People in Washington will handle it, or they will not. Either way, you are done. Go home, live your lives, try to find some peace. They docked in Napoli 18 hours later. Ryan was transferred to Naval Hospital where surgeons who specialized in combat trauma took over his care. Jackson sat in the waiting room with his father and Doc and Preacher and Belov. 5 old men who had survived what should have killed them. The surgeon came out after 4 hours. Your son is going to be fine. Full recovery expected. 6 weeks of physical therapy and he will be back to operational status if he wants. If he wants, Jackson repeated. Does he have a choice? Everyone has a choice. The surgeon looked at Jackson like he was trying to see through him. Your son has been through hell. 3 months of captivity, torture, starvation, surgery in a submarine, near drowning during escape. Most men would be done after that, would take their discharge and try to find some kind of normal life. But Ryan is not most men, Jackson said. No, he is a SEAL, which means he will probably want to go back. Back to the teams, back to the fight. The surgeon paused. The question is whether you are going to let him. He is 26 years old. What I let him do stopped mattering about 10 years ago. Did it? Or have you spent his whole life pushing him toward this? Toward being the warrior you were? Toward fighting your wars? The surgeon's eyes were hard. I see a lot of sons trying to live up to fathers, trying to earn approval that never comes, trying to be good enough for men who were never satisfied. Is that what Ryan is doing? Jackson wanted to be angry, wanted to tell the surgeon to mind his own business, but he was too tired, too broken, too aware that the question was fair. I do not know, Jackson said quietly. I never asked. I just assumed he wanted this because I wanted this, because his grandfather wanted this, because 3 generations of shepherd men wore the uniform, and that is what we do. But maybe I never gave him a choice. Maybe I made it for him before he was old enough to understand what he was choosing. The surgeon nodded once. Talk to your son. Really talk to him. Ask him what he wants, not what he thinks you want, not what would make you proud, what he actually wants. Then respect whatever answer he gives. He left. The waiting room was quiet. James stood and walked to the window, looked out at Napoli, at the city that had been Roman and Greek and Norman and Spanish and survived all of them. I never asked you either, James said, whether you wanted to be a Marine, whether you wanted to be a SEAL. I just assumed you would follow me like I followed my father, like he followed his father. 4 generations of warriors. When does it end? When we decide it ends, Jackson said. When we give the next generation permission to be something other than what we were. Or we accept they will choose for themselves regardless of what we want. James turned from the window. Ryan is alive because we did not give up, because we fought impossible odds, because we were warriors one more time when it mattered. But maybe that is enough. Maybe we can let him decide what comes next. They let Jackson see Ryan that evening. He was in a private room hooked to monitors, IV lines running into both arms. His face was still pale, but the hollowness was gone. The look of a man barely surviving had been replaced by a man who was healing. Dad, Ryan said when Jackson entered. His voice was stronger. You look like hell. You should see the other guy, Jackson said. He sat in the chair beside the bed, How do you feel? Like I got hit by a submarine. Ryan tried to smile. Doc told me what happened. The escape, the ascent. You pulled me to the surface. Preacher and I both. You stopped swimming, started drowning. Hola, I'm crying. We were not going to let that happen. I do not remember any of it. Just darkness, then waking up here. You fought for 3 months as hostage. Your body finally said enough. But you made it. You survived. Ryan was quiet for a moment. The surgeon said I can be back to operational status in 6 weeks. Back to the teams, if I want. Do you want? I do not know. Ryan looked at his hands. For 3 months, all I thought about was surviving, getting through one more day, waiting for rescue, waiting for you. And you came. You actually came. Crossed an ocean, fought a small war, nearly died in a submarine, all for me. Of course I came. You are my son. But would you have done the same thing if I was not a SEAL? If I was a teacher or a doctor or anything else, would you have fought so hard for someone who chose a different path? Jackson felt the question like a knife. Yes. God, yes. Ryan, everything I did because you are my son. Not because you are a SEAL. The uniform does not matter. The trident does not matter. You matter. Then why did you push me toward this? Toward the teams? Toward being like you and Grandpa? Why did you make me feel like I had to be a warrior to make you proud? I did not mean to. Jackson leaned forward, elbows on his knees. I thought I was giving you an example, showing you what service meant, what honor meant. But maybe I was just repeating what my father did, what his father did, passing down expectations without asking if they were what you wanted. What I want is to know I had a choice. Ryan met his father's eyes, that I chose this. Not because it was expected, not because 3 generations of shepherds were warriors, but because I actually wanted to serve, to be part of something bigger, to stand between the dark and the light like Grandpa always says. Did you choose it? Ryan thought for a long moment. Yes, I chose it. I still choose it. But I need to know that if I ever decide to walk away, you will still be proud of me. That I will still be your son, even if I am not a warrior. You will always be my son. Jackson felt tears coming again. Warrior or teacher or anything else. I am proud of you because you are a good man, because you survived hell and came out the other side, because you are better than I ever was. They sat in silence, father and son, 2 men learning how to talk across a gap that had been there for 26 years, learning that love was not just assumed but needed to be spoken, that pride was not just in what you accomplished but in who you chose to be. 3 weeks later, Jackson stood on the pier at Naval Amphibious Base Coronado, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Ryan was being discharged from the hospital. 6 weeks of recovery still ahead, but he was walking, talking, alive. The infection was gone. The wounds were healing. The scars would remain, but scars were just proof you survived. James stood beside him, 89 years old, dying of cancer. 6 months, the doctors had said, and 3 of those months were already gone. But he was standing straight, eyes clear. The same man who had survived Korea in the Cold War and a 300-meter free ascent from a dying submarine. You ever regret it? Jackson asked. All the years, all the wars, all the things you gave up, every day. James watched the sun sink toward the horizon. I regret missing your mother's last years. Regret not being there when you needed a father instead of a commanding officer. Regret pushing you toward a life that cost you your wife and nearly cost you your son. But I do not regret standing between my country and the enemy. Do not regret keeping people safe even when they never knew I was there. Do not regret teaching you to be strong and brave and willing to fight for what matters. James looked at his son. The regrets and the pride exist together. That is what it means to be human. We make choices, we live with them, we do the best we can. Is it enough? James smiled. It has to be, because it is all we have. 2 weeks after that, Marcus Kellerman's body was found in a safe house in Prague. Single gunshot to the head, ruled a suicide. No note, no explanation. Just a man who had run out of places to hide and decided the only escape left was the permanent one. Jackson did not believe it was suicide. Suspected someone in the agency had decided Kellerman was a liability, had sent a cleanup team, had made it look self-inflicted. But he had no proof, no evidence. Just the instinct developed over 40 years that sometimes justice came from unexpected directions. Viktor Belov disappeared into a new identity somewhere in South America. The agency granted him immunity in exchange for testimony about Kellerman's operations. He called Jackson once from an untraceable number. "Your son," Belov said, "he is well. He is healing. Another few weeks and he will be back to full strength." "And will he go back to the teams?" "I do not know. That is his choice." "Good. Let him choose. My brother never got that chance. Neither did I, really. We were told what to be and we obeyed. Your son has the opportunity we did not have. Make sure he takes it." The line went dead. Jackson never heard from Belov again. Never knew if he found peace in whatever life he built far from Montenegro. Never knew if enemies who become brothers stayed brothers when the war was over. He hoped so, hoped that something good came from all the blood and pain. On a Tuesday morning in March, James Shepard died in his sleep. Jackson found him in the small house in the Shenandoah Valley, lying in bed, face peaceful, the M40 rifle on the wall above him, the Korean War medal on the nightstand, a note on the pillow written in careful script. "I have done what I came to do. Fought the wars, raised a son, saved a grandson. The rest is yours to finish. Make it count. Make it mean something. And for God's sake, let Ryan be happy, even if that means not being like us. Love, Dad." They buried James at Arlington with full military honors, a 21-gun salute, taps played by a bugler who had played it 1,000 times. A folded flag presented to Jackson, who held it and wondered how something so light could weigh so much. Ryan stood beside him in dress uniform, the Navy SEAL trident on his chest, the ribbons showing service and sacrifice. But he was not dead inside anymore. The hollowness was gone, replaced by something harder to name. Peace, maybe, or acceptance, or just the understanding that he had survived and that survival was its own kind of victory. After the service, Ryan pulled Jackson aside. "I'm going back to the teams." Jackson nodded. "That is your choice." "It is, but not forever. Not until I am 62 like you. I am giving them 5 more years. Then I am done. Going to be a teacher. History, maybe. Or literature. Something where I help kids understand the world without having to kill for it. Your grandfather would approve. What about you? Do you approve?" Jackson looked at his son, 26 years old, strong and brave and better than Jackson had ever been. "I am proud of you. Whatever you choose, for however long you choose it, you are a good man, Ryan. That is all I ever wanted." They stood together on the hill overlooking the rows of white headstones. Thousands of them, generations of warriors who had stood between the dark and the light, who had made the hard choices, who had paid in blood for country and honor and ideas that sometimes felt hollow, but sometimes felt like the only things worth dying for. The sun was setting, the day was ending, another chapter closing. And Jackson Shepard, 62 years old, more metal than bone in some places, more scars than stories, stood with his son and felt something he had not felt in years. Hope. Hope that the next generation would be better than his. Hope that the wars would end someday. Hope that sacrifice would lead to peace. And hope that when his time came, like his father's time had come, he would face it with courage and know that he had done enough. That he had been enough. That the long walk was over and the rest was silence. 6 months after they buried James Shepard at Arlington, Jackson stood in the garage of his Blue Ridge Mountain cabin, staring at the boxes his father had left behind. 70 years of military service packed into cardboard and dust. Uniforms from Korea. Medals that James had never worn. Photographs from wars that were not supposed to exist. Letters written to a wife who had died 30 years ago and never mailed. Because what do you say to the dead except "I am sorry and I miss you, and I should have been better"? Jackson had been avoiding this work, avoiding the final accounting of a life lived in service and sacrifice. But Ryan was coming today. His first visit since completing his physical therapy, since being cleared for return to operational status, since making the decision about what came next. And Jackson wanted the garage clean before his son arrived. Wanted to show that moving forward was possible, even when the past weighed more than memory could carry. He opened the first box, found his father's dress uniform from Korea. The fabric was moth-eaten in places, but the rank insignia was still bright. Colonel. 3 decades of service before the first star. James had turned down promotion to general twice. Said he was a warfighter, not a politician. Said the day he had to spend more time in meetings than in the field was the day he would retire. He had meant it. Retired at 53 when most officers were just hitting their stride. Walked away because the work had changed and he had not. The second box held weapons. The M40 rifle James had carried since Korea. A 1911 pistol that had been his grandfather's in World War II. A K-bar knife with a handle worn smooth from decades of use. These were not collector's items. These were tools. Instruments of a trade that required precision and will, and the acceptance that sometimes violence was the only answer to violence. Jackson picked up this rifle, felt the weight, the balance, the way it fit against his shoulder like it had been designed specifically for him. James had taught him to shoot with this rifle, taught him to breathe between heartbeats, to squeeze, not pull, to make the shot count because ammunition was finite, but targets were not. The lessons had stayed with Jackson through 40 years of service, through 3 wars, through missions he could talk about and missions that would die with him. He set the rifle aside carefully. Next to it in the box was a photo album. Leather cover cracked with age. Pages yellowed, but the photograph still clear. James as a young man in Korea, maybe 25 years old, holding a rifle, standing with other Marines who looked like children, playing at being soldiers. Most of them were dead now, lost to war or time or the slow grinding weight of surviving when so many others had not. Another photograph, James in his 40s, Cold War era, standing next to a young Marine who Jackson recognized as himself. Father and son, both in uniform, both carrying weapons, both trying to look tough for the camera and mostly succeeding. Jackson remembered that day, remembered James pulling him aside after the photo and saying, "This is who we are. This is what we do. We stand between chaos and order, between darkness and light. It matters. Never forget that it matters." Jackson had believed him then, believed it through decades of service, believed it through losing Laura, through watching Ryan follow the same path, through everything that happened in Montenegro. But now, holding the photograph of 2 warriors from 50 years ago, he wondered if they had been wrong. If standing between darkness and light just meant you got caught in the twilight. Neither fully one thing nor the other, just suspended in the gray where good men did bad things for reasons that sounded noble but felt hollow. A truck engine cut through his thoughts. Jackson looked up to see Ryan's pickup pulling into the driveway. New truck. Compensation from the Navy for 3 months of captivity and injuries sustained in the line of duty. Ryan climbed out moving carefully. The physical therapy had worked, but his body would never be what it was before. The left leg had permanent nerve damage. The shoulder would ache in cold weather. The scars were just scars, but they marked him as someone who had survived what should have killed him. "Dad," Ryan said. He looked at the open garage, at the boxes, at Jackson holding the photograph. "You okay?" "Just going through Grandpa's things, putting his life in order." Jackson set down the photograph. "How was the drive?" "Long, beautiful. I forgot how much I missed these mountains." They stood there for a moment, father and son. The distance between them was smaller now. The conversations were easier, but there was still a gap, still things unsaid, still the weight of expectation and legacy and 3 generations of warriors who had never learned how to be anything else. "Come inside," Jackson said. "I made coffee." The cabin had not changed since Jackson built it 15 years ago. Same wood floors, same stone fireplace, same view of the valley that Laura had loved and Jackson had barely noticed because he was always thinking about the next mission, the next deployment, the next war. But now he noticed. Noticed the way morning light came through the windows. Noticed the way the trees moved in the wind. Noticed that the world was still beautiful even after everything he had seen. They sat at the kitchen table with coffee between them. Ryan looked older, not in years but in experience. 3 months of captivity had carved lines into his face that should not have appeared until he was 40, had put shadows in his eyes that Jackson recognized because he saw them in the mirror every morning. The shadows of men who had seen the worst of humanity and could not unsee it. "I made my decision," Ryan said. "About the teams." Jackson waited, did not push, did not ask. Just waited because this was Ryan's choice and it needed to be spoken without prompting. "I am going back. 5 more years, active duty. Then I am done." Ryan wrapped both hands around his coffee mug. "I talked to a recruiter at University of Virginia. They have a program for veterans who want to teach. History, literature. I am thinking history. Someone needs to tell the stories right. Someone who was there. That is a good plan. You are not disappointed. Why would I be disappointed? Because I am walking away. Because I am not staying until I am 60 like you. Because I am choosing something else. Jackson shook his head. I am proud of you for knowing when enough is enough, for having the courage to choose a different path. I never had that courage. Never knew how to stop. Your grandfather never knew either. We just kept going until we broke or died. You are smarter than we were. I am not smart. I am just tired. Ryan looked out the window at mountains and sky. 3 months in that cell, I had a lot of time to think about what matters, about what I am fighting for. And I realized I do not know anymore. The mission changes, the enemy changes, but we stay the same. We just keep fighting because that is what we know how to do. Is that wrong? I do not know. Maybe it is necessary. Maybe someone has to do it. But it does not have to be me forever. It does not have to be all I am. No, it does not. Jackson leaned back in his chair. Your grandfather left me a note. Said to make sure you were happy even if that meant not being like us. I think he understood at the end what I am just starting to understand now. That legacy is not about making your children repeat your life. It is about giving them the freedom to live their own. Did you feel free? Ryan asked. When you joined the Marines, when you became a SEAL, did you feel like you were choosing or just doing what was expected? Jackson thought about that. Thought about being 19 and angry and wanting to prove something to a father who never said he was proud. Thought about boot camp and buds and the first time he killed a man. Thought about 30 years of choosing the job over everything else because the job at least made sense in a way that peace never did. I thought I was choosing, Jackson said finally. But looking back, I think I was just following a path that was already laid out. Your grandfather was a warrior. His father was a warrior. That is what shepherd men did. It never occurred to me there might be another option. Are you angry about that? That you never had a choice? No, Jackson met his son's eyes. I am grateful. Being a SEAL gave me purpose, gave me brothers, gave me experiences that most people never have. But it also cost me your mother, cost me most of your childhood, cost me pieces of myself that I will never get back. So I am grateful and sad, and both of those things are true at the same time. Ryan nodded slowly. That is how I feel, grateful and sad, proud and regretful, like I did something important but also something stupid. Like I matter and I do not matter. Like everything I did was necessary and meaningless. That is called being human, Jackson said. Welcome to it. They spent the afternoon going through James's boxes together. Found letters he had written to his wife Eleanor during Korea. Found citations for medals he had earned and never mentioned. Found a journal from 1953 that detailed operations in North Korea that were still classified 70 years later. Found photographs of men whose names Jackson did not know, but whose faces showed they had been warriors like James, like Jackson, like Ryan. An unbroken line of men who stood between darkness and light and paid in blood for the privilege. In the last box, they found something unexpected. A video camera. Old. The kind that used cassette tapes and a note in James's handwriting. For Jackson and Ryan, watch this together. Remember that love is stronger than duty. That family matters more than honor. That we were men before we were warriors. They set up the camera, found the tape labeled Final Message, pressed play. The screen flickered. Then James appeared, sitting in his living room, the same room where Jackson had found him dead, but alive here, maybe a week before he died, looking tired but clear-eyed, looking like a man who had made peace with whatever came next. Jackson, Ryan, James's voice filled the cabin. If you are watching this, I am dead. Probably went in my sleep because God knows I have earned a peaceful end after 70 years of violence. I am recording this because there are things I need to say while I still can. Things I should have said years ago but did not, because I am a stubborn old man who thought actions mattered more than words. James paused on the screen, reached for a glass of water, drank, continued. Jackson, you are my son, the only one I had, the one your mother and I prayed for after 3 miscarriages that broke her heart. When you were born, I looked at you and thought, this is my legacy. This is what I leave behind when I am gone. And I was so proud, so grateful. But I also started planning your life before you could walk. Started imagining you in uniform. Started building expectations that maybe were not fair. On screen, James looked down at his hands. The same hands that had held rifles and killed men and taught Jackson to be strong. I pushed you toward the military, James continued. Taught you to shoot when you were 8. Took you to the range every weekend. Told you stories about Korea and the Gulf that probably gave you nightmares, but made you think that being a warrior was the highest calling, the only thing that mattered. And you believed me. You followed my path, became a better SEAL than I ever was. And I told myself I had done well, had raised a strong son. James looked back at the camera. His eyes were wet. But I failed you in the things that mattered more. I failed to teach you how to love your wife well, how to be present for your son, how to find peace when the wars ended. I taught you duty and honor and sacrifice, but not joy, not rest, not grace. And for that I am sorry, more sorry than I can express in words. Jackson felt his throat tighten, felt tears starting. Next to him, Ryan was silent, watching, listening to a dead man apologize for things that could not be changed. Ryan, James said, his face softened. You are my grandson. I did not get to know you as well as I should have. Your father was deployed. I was old. We saw each other maybe twice a year. But I watched you grow up through photographs and phone calls and the stories your father told. And I was proud. Proud when you became a SEAL. Proud when you survived what should have killed you. Proud of the man you became despite everything. James leaned forward in his chair. The camera angle was slightly wrong, too low, like he had set it up himself and could not quite get it right. But now I want you to know something important. You do not have to be like us. You do not have to follow this path. You do not have to spend your life at war. There are other ways to serve, other ways to matter. Your great-great-grandfather owned a bookstore in Philadelphia, lived to 92, never fired a shot in anger. And he was a good man, a man who mattered, who helped his community, who raised children. His legacy was quieter than ours, but no less important. On the screen, James stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the same valley Jackson was looking at now. Legacy, James said quietly, is not about passing down your profession. It is about passing down your values. Courage, honor, love, service. These things matter whether you are a warrior or a teacher or a man who sells books. What matters is that you stand for something, that you help people, that you leave the world better than you found it. The uniform is just a tool. The real work is in the heart. He turned back to the camera, looked directly at it, at them, at the future he would not see. I am dying, James said. Cancer. Everywhere. I have maybe 3 months. The doctors wanted to fight it. Radiation, chemotherapy, all the ways we try to hold death at bay. But I am 89 years old. I have lived longer than I had any right to expect. I am tired, ready. So I said no. I will go when I go, and I will go on my own terms. James smiled. It was the smile of a man at peace. I am not afraid. I have faced death enough times to know it is just another mission. One more thing to accomplish. And I will accomplish it the way I accomplished everything else. With courage, with dignity, with the understanding that I did my best, that I loved well even if imperfectly, that I served with honor even when the orders were wrong. He sat back down. The camera angle was better now. His face filled the screen. Jackson, Ryan, you are good men, better than me, better than I taught you to be. And whatever you choose to do next, know that I am proud. Know that I love you. Know that duty and honor are important, but love is essential. Never forget that. Never let the mission become more important than the people you are fighting for. James reached forward. The screen went black, then flickered back on. James again, but closer now, like he had picked up the camera. One more thing, he said. His voice was softer, almost a whisper in the third box. The one with the medals. There is an envelope. It has money. A lot of it. Savings from 40 years of not spending because I did not know what to spend it on. I want you to use it. Take Ryan somewhere peaceful. Not a military base or a memorial or anything related to war. Just a place where you can be father and son, where you can talk and laugh and remember that life is more than fighting. James smiled one more time. Then the camera clicked off. The screen showed static. Then nothing. Jackson and Ryan sat in silence for a long time. The afternoon light was fading. The cabin was growing dark. Neither man moved to turn on lights. They just sat there processing what they had heard, what their father and grandfather had given them. Permission, Absolution. The understanding that being warriors was part of their story, but did not have to be all of it. He knew, Ryan said finally. He knew he was dying when he did the submarine escape, when he did that 300-meter ascent. He knew it would probably kill him, but he did it anyway. Yes, that is the most dad thing I have ever heard. Jackson laughed. It came out rough, half sob, but it was laughter, the first real laughter he had felt since Laura died. Yes, yes it is. They found the envelope in the third box. Inside was $50,000 in cash and a note. Alaska. I always wanted to see it, never did. Go for me. Tell me about it when we meet again. 3 weeks later, Jackson and Ryan flew to Anchorage, rented a truck, drove north into the wilderness where cell service died and civilization gave way to mountains and rivers and sky that went on forever. They camped, fished, sat by fires and talked about things they had never talked about Laura and what she meant, about James and what he represented, about the cost of service and the weight of legacy, and how hard it was to be a son of warriors when all you wanted was to be a man. On the fifth day, they hiked to a lake that had no name on any map. Water so clear you could see 20 feet down. Mountains reflected perfectly on the surface like the world was doubled. They sat on the shore and Ryan asked the question Jackson had been waiting for. Do you think it was worth it? Everything you sacrificed, everything you lost, was it worth the cost? Jackson watched the mountains and the water, watched the way the light changed as clouds moved across the sun, thought about Laura dying in a hospital bed, about missing Ryan's childhood, about James lying alone in his house when death came, about all the men he had served with who never came home, about Preacher and Doc and the brothers who answered when called, because that is what brothers did, about Viktor Belov, who lost a brother and spent 37 years carrying hate until he learned it was built on lies, about Marco and his men who died in a submarine fighting for a cause they barely understood. I do not know, Jackson said finally. The honest answer is I do not know. I want to say yes. I want to believe that everything I did mattered, that the wars we fought made the world safer, that the sacrifices we made bought peace for others. But I cannot prove it, cannot point to anything concrete and say that is what I did. That is why it mattered. Then why did you do it? Because I did not know what else to do. Because I was good at it. Because it gave me purpose and identity and belonging. Because I believed the lie that we tell ourselves. That violence can solve problems. That strong men standing ready can prevent war. That duty and honor means something more than just words we use to justify sending young men to die. Jackson picked up a stone, threw it into the lake, watched the ripples spread. But here is what I know now, Jackson continued. What mattered was not the missions or the medals or the body count. What mattered was the men beside me, the brothers who would run into fire for me, who would carry me when I fell, who would remember me when I was gone. That is the truth beneath all the propaganda. We do not fight for country or freedom or any of the grand ideas. We fight for each other, for the man on our left and our right, for the squadron, the platoon, the team. That is real. Everything else is just noise. So it was worth it, Ryan said. The brotherhood was worth it. The service to each other was worth it. The rest, Jackson shrugged, the rest I am still figuring out. They stayed in Alaska for 2 weeks, hiked until their legs gave out, fished until their arms were sore, talked until there were no more words. And somewhere in those mountains, Jackson felt something shift, felt the weight of 40 years start to lift, felt the possibility that maybe there was life after war, that maybe he could be something other than a weapon waiting to be deployed. On the last day, they built a cairn on the shore of the nameless lake, stacked stones carefully, made it tall, made it stable, made it last. At the top, they placed a note sealed in a waterproof bag. It said, James Shepard was here, through us, through memory, through love that does not end when the body fails. They flew home to Virginia. Ryan went back to the teams for his final 5 years. Jackson stayed in the mountains, started teaching himself to be still, to exist in peace, to find meaning in small things like sunrise and coffee and the way birds move through trees. It was harder than war, required a different kind of courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to feel, to acknowledge that strength was not the same as hardness and that sometimes the bravest thing was to let yourself break and then rebuild differently. 2 years after Alaska, Jackson got a call from Commander Sarah Chen. She had retired from the Navy, was working for a nonprofit that helped veterans transition to civilian life. They needed instructors, people who understood what it meant to come home from war and not know how to stop fighting. You interested? Chen asked. I do not know anything about teaching. You know about war. You know about survival. You know about carrying weight that does not show. Chen paused. These kids need someone who understands, someone who has been where they are, someone who can say, I got through it and so can you. Jackson thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. Yes, I am interested. He started teaching the next month. Classes for veterans, not about tactics or weapons or any of the hard skills that turn men into warriors. Classes about grief, about loss, about learning to sleep without nightmares, about talking to spouses who did not understand, about finding purpose when the mission ended and no one was telling you what to do next. The work was harder than anything Jackson had done in uniform, required him to be honest about his own struggles, his own failures. The nights he drank too much, the times he drove to the base and sat in the parking lot because being around other warriors was easier than being alone. The way he had pushed away everyone who tried to help because accepting help felt like weakness. But slowly he got better at it, better at being honest, better at listening, better at understanding that healing was not weakness, that asking for help took more courage than any firefight, that surviving war was only half the battle. Learning to live after war was the other half, and most warriors never figured it out. Ryan visited when he could, between deployments, between training cycles, between the missions that he could not talk about and Jackson did not ask about. They would sit on the cabin porch and drink beer and watch the sun go down over mountains that had seen the birth and death of civilizations and would be there long after both of them were dust. On one visit, Ryan brought news. I am getting married. Jackson felt joy and fear in equal measure. Who is she? Her name is Emily, teacher, high school English. I met her at a friend's wedding. We have been dating for 8 months. She knows what I do, knows I will be gone more than I am home for the next 3 years. She says she can handle it. Can she? Ryan was quiet. I do not know, I hope so. But I remember how it was with you and Mom, how she waited, how she hurt every time you deployed, how she died partly from cancer, but partly from carrying that weight for 30 years. I do not want to do that to Emily. Then do not, Jackson said. Be better than I was. Be present when you are home. Talk to her. Tell her you love her. Do all the things I failed to do with your mother. What if it is not enough? What if the job takes too much? Then you choose. Job or marriage, career or love. No one can make that choice for you, but know that whatever you choose, you have to live with. And living with regret is harder than living with sacrifice. Ryan nodded, stared at his beer. I am scared. Good. Being scared means it matters. Being scared means you care enough to worry. That is healthy. Were you scared when you married Mom? Terrified, Jackson said. I was 25. I was a SEAL. I thought I was immortal. But the idea of promising forever to someone, of being responsible for their happiness, that scared me more than any combat operation. But you did it anyway. I did it anyway. And it was the best decision I ever made, even knowing how it ended, even knowing the pain. I would do it again. Ryan got married 6 months later. Small ceremony. Family and close friends. Jackson stood as best man, watched his son promise forever to a woman who looked at him like he was the only person in the room. Watched Emily promise to wait, to support, to love through deployments and danger and all the uncertainty that came with being married to a warrior. And Jackson prayed they would be better than he and Laura had been, that they would figure out what he never did, how to balance duty and love, how to serve without sacrificing everything, how to be warrior and husband and not lose yourself in the space between. 3 years after Montenegro, Jackson got another call, this one from an unknown number with a European country code. I am dying, Viktor Belov said. His voice was rough, weaker than Jackson remembered. Cancer. The doctors give me weeks. I wanted to call before the end, to say thank you. For what? For giving me purpose. For letting me die knowing I did one good thing, that I helped save your son, that I stood against Kellerman, that I mattered. You did matter, Jackson said. You do matter. I am a criminal, Belov said. An arms dealer. I have blood on my hands from 100 conflicts. Good men died because of weapons I sold. Children died. Families. I cannot undo that. Cannot make it right. No, But you can accept that people are complicated, that good men do bad things and bad men do good things, and most of us are somewhere in the middle, trying to figure it out as we go. Belov laughed. It turned into coughing. When he could speak again, his voice was barely a whisper. Your father was right about you. You are wise. I am not wise. I am just old. It looks the same from the outside. Tell Ryan I am proud of him. Tell him Dmitri would have liked him, would have been honored to have someone so brave carrying his memory. I will tell him. And Jackson. One more thing. Belov's breathing was labored now. Painful. Do not waste the time you have. I wasted 37 years on hate, on revenge that meant nothing. I would give anything to have those years back, to have spent them differently. Do not make my mistake. I will not. Good. Then I will go now. It is time. The line went dead. Jackson sat holding the phone thinking about a Russian arms dealer dying alone in South America. Thinking about Dmitry Belov, who died at 20 in a Beirut firefight. Thinking about all the brothers lost to wars that most people forgot as soon as the news cycle moved on. Thinking that maybe that was the real tragedy. Not that men died, but that they were forgotten. That their sacrifices meant nothing to people who never knew their names. He called Ryan that night, told him about Belov, about the message, about the warning not to waste time. I am coming home, Ryan said. 3 more months and my enlistment is up. I am done. I kept my word. 5 years, but I am done now. I want to be a husband, maybe a father someday. I want to teach kids about history so maybe they learn something. Maybe they do not repeat our mistakes. That is good, Jackson said. That is really good. Will you help me? With the teaching program. With figuring out how to be something other than a SEAL. Yes, I will help you. We will figure it out together. 6 months later, Ryan got his honorable discharge. 21-gun salute, folded flag, all the ceremony that the Navy used to mark the end of service. He stood at attention while they read his commendations, his deployments, the medals he had earned, the blood he had shed, and when it was over, he walked away from the only life he had known since he was 18 and did not look back. He started graduate school at University of Virginia, education program, learning how to teach history to kids who thought World War II was ancient history and the Gulf War was something their parents barely remembered. Learning how to make it relevant, how to make it matter, how to tell the stories of ordinary men doing extraordinary things in circumstances no one should have to face. Jackson helped when he could, came to Charlottesville, sat in on classes, watched his son transform from warrior to teacher, watched him learn patience, learn to listen, learn that some victories were measured in understanding, not in body count. On a spring evening, 3 years after Montenegro, they sat in Ryan's small apartment near campus. Papers everywhere, lesson plans, books about pedagogy and child psychology, and how to reach kids who did not want to be reached. Emily was at her own school, teacher conferences. The apartment was quiet except for traffic sounds from the street below. I got a letter today, Ryan said, from Marco's widow. Jackson looked up. I did not know he was married. She lives in Belgrade, found my name through Veterans Affairs, wanted to know what happened, why her husband died in the Adriatic. What did you tell her? The truth, that he died helping us escape, that he sacrificed his men to save mine, that he was brave and loyal, and he made the hard choice. Ryan stared at his hands. She wrote back, said she was angry, that I was alive and her husband was not, that she had 2 children who would grow up without a father because he chose to help strangers. She is right to be angry, I know, but it does not make it easier, knowing that my life cost other lives, that I am here because 8 men died in that submarine. That is survivor's guilt, Jackson said. Every veteran who makes it home feels it, feels like they should have died instead, like the universe made a mistake letting them survive. How do you deal with it? You do not deal with it, you live with it, you carry it, you let it make you better instead of bitter. You honor the dead by living well, by doing something meaningful with the time they bought you. Ryan nodded slowly. That is what I am trying to do. Teaching, helping kids understand, making sure the sacrifices are not forgotten. Then you are doing it right. They sat in silence, father and son, both carrying weight, both learning how to walk with it, both understanding that some burdens could not be set down, could only be carried with grace. 5 years after Montenegro, Jackson got the call he had been expecting. Doc Chen had died. Heart attack. Sudden. He was 67 years old, had spent 5 years after their mission helping veterans with PTSD, had saved dozens of lives, had made peace with the lives he could not save. And then one morning he did not wake up, just went to sleep and did not come back. The funeral was small. Doc had no family, no wife or children, just brothers from the teams. Old men now, gray and bent but still standing straight when it mattered. They buried him at a cemetery in San Diego with a view of the ocean, with the sound of surf that was almost like the sound of wind in the mountains but different, quieter, more peaceful. Jackson gave the eulogy, talked about Doc's skill, his courage, his loyalty, talked about 300-meter ascent in surgery in a submarine, and all the impossible things Doc had made possible through will and training and refusal to quit. Talked about brotherhood, about men who answered when called, about love that looked like duty but was something deeper. When it was over, Preacher pulled Jackson aside. "I am thinking about joining you. Joining me where? Teaching, helping veterans, doing something useful with what is left." Preacher looked old, not in body. He was still built like a tank, but in eyes, in the way he moved, like every step hurt, like he was tired. "I am 69 years old. I have outlived most of my friends. I want to do something that matters before I go." "You have always done things that matter." "Have I? Or have I just been good at violence? Good at following orders? Good at surviving when others did not?" Preacher shook his head. "I do not know anymore. I just know I am tired of being a weapon. I want to be something else." "Then come teach with me. We need all the help we can get." Preacher started the next month, taught classes on resilience, on finding purpose after service, on building new identities when the old ones no longer fit. He was good at it, better than Jackson expected, had a way of connecting with young veterans, of making them feel understood, of showing them that life after war was possible, even when it seemed impossible. 7 years after Montenegro, Jackson got a letter from the Department of Defense. It was formal, official, requested his presence at a ceremony in Washington, did not say why, just said his attendance was requested and appreciated. He almost did not go, almost threw the letter away. But Ryan convinced him, said it might be important, said closure sometimes came from unexpected places. So Jackson flew to Washington, wore his dress uniform that still fit but felt strange after years of civilian clothes, felt like putting on a costume, pretending to be someone he used to be. The ceremony was at the Pentagon. Small room, maybe 30 people, most of them old, most of them veterans of wars that were history now. At the front of the room was the Secretary of Defense, a woman Jackson did not know, young, maybe 50, career politician who had never worn the uniform but respected those who did. She spoke about classified operations, about men who served in shadows, about sacrifices that could never be publicly acknowledged, about missions that if successful meant no one ever knew they happened. She talked about Marcus Kellerman, about corruption, about betrayal, about the investigation that had concluded after 7 years of painstaking work by multiple agencies. Kellerman had been running illegal operations for 20 years, selling weapons, trafficking intelligence, funding groups that served his interests, not America's interests. The investigation had uncovered dozens of operations, hundreds of deaths, billions in illegal transactions, all of it hidden behind classification and bureaucracy and the assumption that no one would look close enough to see. The evidence Jackson had transmitted from a dying submarine had been the breakthrough, had given investigators the threads they needed to unravel decades of corruption. Kellerman had disappeared when the investigation went public. His body was found 3 years later in Prague. The official ruling was suicide, but those who knew understood it was justice of a different kind. Someone in the intelligence community had decided that some secrets were too dangerous to let live. The secretary called Jackson forward, handed him a medal. Not the Medal of Honor, not the Navy Cross, something he had never heard of, the Intelligence Star, given for voluntary acts of exceptional courage in the line of intelligence duty. For actions in Montenegro, the secretary said, for exposing corruption at the highest levels of the Central Intelligence Agency, for preventing illegal weapons transactions that would have destabilized an entire region, for exemplary service under conditions of extreme personal risk. The Intelligence Star is awarded to Jackson Shepard. She pinned it to his uniform, shook his hand, stepped back. The room applauded. Jackson stood there feeling nothing, feeling everything, feeling like the metal was simultaneously too much and not enough. Like no piece of metal could account for what had been lost. For James, for Marco and his men, for Doc, for all the years and blood and sacrifice. But it meant someone had paid attention, someone had cared, and maybe that was enough. After the ceremony, Jackson walked to Arlington, to his father's grave. The headstone was simple. Colonel James Shepard, Korean War, Cold War operations, 70 years of service, dates of birth and death that contained a lifetime. Jackson stood there holding the medal in his hand. "We did it," Jackson said to the stone, to the ground, to whatever remained of his father in this place. "We exposed Kellerman. We got Ryan home. We survived. I know you are not here. I know you are just bones and memory now. But I wanted you to know, we finished what you started." The wind moved through the cemetery, moved through thousands of white stones marking thousands of warriors who had stood between darkness and light, who had paid in blood for country and honor, in ideas that sometimes felt like lies and sometimes felt like the only truth that mattered. Jackson stood there for a long time. Then he walked back to his hotel, back to his life, back to teaching veterans how to survive peace when war was all they had ever known. 10 years after Montenegro, Ryan became a father, a daughter, Sarah, named after Commander Chen, who had saved their lives. 8 pounds, healthy, perfect. When Jackson held her for the first time, he felt something he had not felt in decades. Hope, pure and uncomplicated. Hope that this child would never know war, would never have to choose between duty and love, would never have to carry the weight that 3 generations of shepherd men had carried. "You are going to tell her about Grandpa James," Ryan said, "about what he did, about who he was." "Yes, but I am also going to tell her about Grandma Laura, about how she waited, about how she loved, about how strength is not just about fighting." Jackson looked at his granddaughter, at her small hands and closed eyes and the absolute trust that infants have that the world will protect them. "I am going to tell her that warriors matter, but so do teachers and nurses and people who sell books. That courage is not just charging into fire, that sometimes courage is building a life when war ends, that sometimes the bravest thing is choosing peace." Ryan nodded. "Good, that is good." 15 years after Montenegro, Jackson stood at his cabin window, watching the sun rise over the Blue Ridge Mountains. He was 77 years old. His body hurt in the ways that old bodies hurt, but his mind was clear, his heart was full. He had learned to sleep without nightmares most nights, had learned to talk about Laura without breaking, had learned that healing was not forgetting but accepting. His phone rang, unknown number. He almost did not answer, but something made him pick up. "Is this Jackson Shepard?" a voice asked. Young, male, uncertain. "Yes, my name is Dmitry Belov. I am calling from Moscow. I am Viktor Belov's nephew, named after my uncle who died in Beirut. My father was Viktor. He died 3 months ago. He left me letters, instructions, said I should call you." Jackson sat down slowly. "How did you find my number?" "It was in the letters, along with a message." The voice paused. "He said to tell you that some debts cannot be repaid, that some sacrifices echo across generations, that he was grateful, that he hoped you found peace." "I did," Jackson said. "Tell your father, tell Victor, wherever he is, that he was a good man, that he chose the right side when it mattered, that I was honored to fight beside him. I will tell him. Even though he is dead, I will tell him." "Thank you." The line went dead. Jackson sat holding the phone thinking about circles closing, about enemies becoming brothers, about legacies that were not just about continuing traditions, but about breaking cycles, about choosing differently, about making the hard decisions that let the next generation be better than you were. He called Ryan, told him about the call, about Dmitry Belov, about the message from beyond the grave. "Some stories do not end," Ryan said. "They just keep going, changing shape, becoming something new." "Yes," Jackson said, "that is exactly right." 20 years after Montenegro, Jackson Shepard died in his sleep. He was 82 years old, had outlived his father by 7 years, had taught hundreds of veterans how to survive peace, had watched his granddaughter grow, had seen his son become the teacher he had never been, had made peace with the ghosts that haunted him, had learned that legacy was not about forcing the next generation to repeat your life. It was about giving them the freedom to choose their own. They buried him at Arlington next to his father, 3 generations of shepherd warriors in the ground. Ryan stood at attention in civilian clothes, no uniform, no medals, just a man honoring his father, his grandfather. The long line of men who had stood between darkness and light and paid the price that service demanded. When it was over, Ryan walked away from the graves with his daughter Sarah. She was 10 years old, smart, curious, wanted to know everything about everything. Was Grandpa Jackson a hero? Sarah asked. Ryan thought about that question, thought about all the ways it could be answered, thought about missions classified and unclassified, about men saved and men lost, about the cost and the gain, about whether any of it made sense or mattered or added up to something more than just violence begetting violence. He was a warrior, Ryan said finally, a man who did hard things in hard times. But what made him a hero was not the fighting, it was that he learned to stop, that he figured out how to be something other than a weapon, that he helped other people do the same. That matters more than any medal or mission. Will I be a warrior too, Sarah asked. Only if you choose to be. Only if that is what you want. You can be anything, Sarah. Teacher or doctor or warrior or person who sells books. Whatever you choose, I will be proud. Did Grandpa Jackson say that to you? Eventually. It took him a long time to learn how. But yes, eventually he said it. And I believed him. They walked through Arlington, through thousands of graves, through the weight of American history written in stone and sacrifice. And Ryan felt something he had not expected to feel. Peace, gratitude. The understanding that the long war was over, that his father and grandfather had fought so he did not have to, that the greatest gift they gave him was not their example, it was their permission to be different. The sun was setting over Washington, over the monuments to wars won and lost, over the memorials to men whose names were known and men whose names were forgotten, over a nation that was still learning what sacrifice meant, what service cost, what legacy required. Ryan picked up Sarah and put her on his shoulders, started walking toward the parking lot, toward home, toward a life where war was memory, not reality, where peace was possible not because warriors stood ready, but because enough people chose something different, chose to build instead of destroy, chose to teach instead of fight, chose to love instead of hate. And in that moment, walking away from the graves of 3 generations of warriors, Ryan Shepherd felt something his father and grandfather had spent their lives seeking. Freedom, not from duty, not from sacrifice, but from the belief that those things were the only things that mattered. Legacy was not about chains binding you to the past. It was about wings carrying you toward the future. And for the first time in his life, Ryan felt himself beginning to fly.